Chapter 644. Dangyang, how dare you fight over a disciple of our fair maiden peak? It was a great sage woman. She was dressed in dark green clothes that enhanced her outstanding personality even further. She looked outstanding. She had a dignified presence. She was the chief of the fair maiden peak. The original names of these big inheritances chiefs would often get concealed after they had obtained the position of chief. They would then use the name of the inheritance. For example, Hidden Star Chief wasn't the real name of the Hidden Star Peaks chief. He had gotten this name after he had obtained the position of the chief. Fair Maiden, who said that this extraordinary child belongs to your fair maiden peak. Dangyang Peak's chief objected. Is there any record for that? Humph. She herself wants to become a disciple of my fair maiden peak. The face of fair maiden peak's chief turned cold as she said. She regretted in secrecy. I wouldn't have let Xiaoyu appear here if I had known that she had such talent. I would have recruited her in advance and made others jealous. However, how would Xiaoyu have gotten the attention of a person like the fair maiden peak's chief if she hadn't passed through such a ruckus? Grabbing her attention was impossible even for an ordinary Heaven's Pride expert. After all, what was her duty? Heaven's Pride experts were rare. However, she had seen and even killed many Heaven's Pride experts in her entire life. Don't join them. Dangyang Peak's chief decided to act shamelessly. Is face an important thing? It indeed is. However, what is face in comparison to real inheritance and such a talented disciple? One must lose it if it is required. Moreover, he wouldn't have dressed like this in the first place if he had genuinely cared about his face. Dangyang Peak's chief was firmly staring at Xiaoyu as he said. He secretly calculated. Her skeleton is exquisite, and the meridians in her body are no exception either. She doesn't only have outstanding qualifications. In fact, her foundation is also extremely rare. Incredible aptitude and rare foundation. Such person is bound to have great achievements. I can say with certainty that it won't be a difficult thing for this little doll to reach up to my level in the future as long as there isn't any mishap. So what if I have to act shamelessly this time? Wrong. All of you are wrong. Fate has brought this young girl for our 10,000 fathoms peak. Can't you see that she is standing as straight as a sword? She must join my sword cultivator sect. Another figure broke down the space and arrived from the sky at this time. He looked like a sword cultivator and was dressed in black clothes. He had appeared riding a flying sword. He was also an almighty figure in the true martial university. He was the chief of the 10,000 fathoms peak. It was also one of the top 10 big inheritances. He was the leader of the sword cultivation department among true martial university's several inheritances. In fact, sword cultivation wasn't a small inheritance in the true martial world. On the contrary, many people had chosen the path of sword cultivation. There were many experts who used to practice sword technique. Quite rare people particularly had the essence of a sword cultivator. However, they could be regarded as quasi-sword cultivators in reality. And 10,000 Fathoms Peak was the leader of many sword cultivator inheritances in the true martial university. In other words, the sword cultivators of the entire true martial world had emerged out from the 10,000 Fathoms Peak. Let's say one looked at the lineage of a sword cultivator and traced back to countless years. Then, one of their ancestral generations could certainly be traced back to the 10,000 Fathoms Peak. It was the beginning of all the sword cultivators of the entire true martial world. One could well imagine what would be the position of 10,000 Fathoms Peak in the true martial university or in the entire true martial world. The 10,000 Fathoms Peak had never declined since the time it was ranked among the top 10 big inheritances of the true martial university. It had always been among the top 10 big inheritances. It was different from the Hidden Star Peak, which was flourishing once and had then declined from the position of top 10 big inheritances. Moreover, the 10,000 Fathoms Peak had always been ahead of several inheritances among the top 10 big inheritances. In fact, sometimes they had also acquired the first position. One could well imagine how powerful the 10,000 Fathoms Peak was. The 10,000 Fathoms Peak's chief was also a well-known sword cultivator. He had already surpassed the great sage realm countless years ago. He was insanely powerful. Some people used to say that he was second only to the Supreme Lord. Meanwhile, some people also used to say that he could even compete against the Supreme Lord. After all, he was a sword cultivator, and everyone knew the attack force of a sword cultivator. However, it was just a matter of discussion. Both the 10,000 Fathoms Peak's chief and the Supreme Lord were godlike legendary figures for everyone. They knew that such people existed. However, they might not be able to see them even once in their entire lives. Many disciples present in the surroundings were already left dumbstruck. Two chiefs had appeared in succession just now. This was already beyond their expectations. And they hadn't expected that the 10,000 Fathoms Peak's chief would appear for this timid-looking young girl now. My God, what the hell is happening in this world? Many of us have given the aptitude test. However, none of us have gotten the opportunity to enter the true martial university. And 3 chiefs are competing for this young girl now. These chiefs were like legendary gods for these people. What an ordinary person would feel if they saw gods fighting over something. What would they feel? Bai Jiansong's complexion had also become unnatural. It was clear that he also hadn't thought that this matter would turn so big. The chiefs of 3 inheritances among the top 10 big inheritances had already appeared. Only this was enough to cause a sensation in the entire true martial university. He had already entered the great sage realm. So, he wouldn't pay attention to the chief of an ordinary inheritance. However, he wouldn't dare to disrespect these 3 chiefs because they had already surpassed the great sage realm. The power which he was immensely proud of was nothing in front of these 3 people. His power was nothing even though he had entered the great sage realm. In fact, such elusive characters in the entire true martial university could be counted on fingers. However, the true martial university could dominate the entire southern region depending upon these people. These people were the real heritage, because of which the true martial university could dominate a region. Each of these individuals had an illustrious reputation in the outside world. Therefore, Bai Jiansong was left dumbstruck when these chiefs had arrived in front of him. Yi Shiwen was even more dumbfounded. He already knew that Xiaoya wasn't an ordinary genius. However, he also hadn't thought that these chiefs would personally arrive here and fight over her. No. How can this happen? A little girl like her should associate herself with poetry books. She shouldn't fight and kill all day long. Everyone hadn't even digested the shock when a figure came out walking from the sky. He was a man who was dressed like a Confucian scholar. He appeared in front of everyone with a book in his hands. Everyone's mouth became wide opened. It's the chief of another top 10 big inheritance. Statecraft's Institution Chief. Statecraft Institution was a very special sect in the true martial university. Its headquarters weren't on a mountain. Instead, they were in a huge valley. It had an outer appearance of a college. The disciples of the college were also not chosen from the outside world. The disciples of Statecraft Institution were often educated scholars. Each person could be in charge of a region in the world. It was the birthplace of Confucianism in the true martial world. It was regarded as a sacred place by every Confucian disciple of the true martial world. It had a unique identity in the true martial university. It was a very unique and rare branch. Their disciples were mainly seen roaming in the courts of every dynasty. Generally, their disciples also used to rarely appear in front of the disciples of the true martial university. It was a wing of the true martial university. However, ordinary disciples also had very limited understanding of them. However, the Statecraft Institution was one of the top 10 big inheritances. How could it be a simple sect? One would know this by just thinking about it. Scholar, even you want to compete with us? What could this baby doll learn from you? Would she wield the court of a region and its political affairs? Don't you Confucians pay particular attention to the set of 3 principles? And don't these 3 principles basically involve only men? So, what is the need of a woman in the Confucian group? The complexion of the chief of Dangyang Peak remained unchanged as he said. Those are worldly prejudices. It won't be a difficult thing for her to leave a mark on a country as long as she graduates from my Statecraft Institution. The Statecraft Institution's chief said disdainfully. It seemed as if he didn't pay attention to the words of the chief of Dangyang Peak. Moreover, my statecraft institution doesn't merely teach those methods of ruling a country. My noble Confucian way is a nemesis for all evil ways on the basis of cultivation. It has its own uniqueness. The statecraft institution's chief didn't hesitate in putting aside his arrogance after he had seen such a good seedling. Courtesy and so on seem to be exceptionally ridiculous things at present. We can't convince anyone. It'll be better to fight it out. Whoever wins will be entitled to recruit this little child as their disciple. Other guys will also show up if we wait any longer. The situation will become even more chaotic at that time. They may also have obtained the news by now. It'll be certainly difficult to compete after a while. Dangyang Peak's chief said. This seemed to be the final decision. He wanted to take Xiao Ya's jurisdiction by taking advantage of the absence of other chiefs. Otherwise, the competition would certainly become even more intense when the other chiefs would arrive. All right. 10,000 Fathoms Peak's chief raised his eyebrows and said. A long sword issued a buzzing sound behind him. The sword energies began to revolve in the surroundings. He seemed all set to unleash it. His cultivation might not be highest among these four people. However, he was a well-known figure in real battles. He was a grand sword cultivator. How could he be defeated at this time? Shameless. The beautiful face of the chief of Fair Maiden Peak turned ice-cold. She spurted out this word from between her lips and teeth. Her face had a threatening chill. Xiaoyu was supposed to enter my inheritance initially. God knows how this chaos has occurred. Each of these old guys is shameless. They just don't care about their faces. She had understood the mood of these old guys. However, understanding their mentality had no use because nobody could retreat at this time. I feel that we must respect this little girl's opinion, the statecraft institution's chief said at this time. He knew that he had tyrannical strength, and he was one of the top-tier experts in the true martial world. He might not necessarily lose in the real fight as well. However, he also wasn't sure that he would win. Therefore, it would be better to change the way. There was a look of embarrassment on the faces of the other chiefs at this time. They had fought for a long time and hadn't asked where this little girl wanted to go. The True Martial University's current rule was that the disciple must make their own choice. Therefore, the gazes of all the big chiefs commutatively fell on Xiaoya as this suggestion was passed. And Xiaoya looked at Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if she was asking for his opinion. Therefore, Yi Shiwen instantly felt that the knife-like visions of all the great chiefs had fallen onto his body. To be continued. Chapter 645. Many sharp gazes were fixed firmly on Yi Shiwen. After all, they could see Xiao Ya's dependency on him. Therefore, his opinion was very important if they wanted to receive her into their respective sections. Boy, you say? Where should this little girl go? Dangyang Peak's chief shouted. It seemed as if he could see through Yi Shiwen from the way he was looking at him. Yi Zaiwen's expression turned cold. These people are extremely formidable. I would be in big danger if their imposing auras accidentally locked upon me. Perhaps even me being a great sage would have been nothing for them. These people have already surpassed the great sage realm. Whether the sage exerts are many or a few doesn't matter for the great sages. These people are the real pillars of the true martial university. Their number is very small. They can be counted on fingers. However, the true martial university can dominate the entire southern region by just depending upon these people. This girl's name is Yiya. She must enter our Fair Maiden Peak. Fair Maiden Peak's chief said. Her mellow voice sounded pleasant to the ears. Even Yi Shiwen didn't know Xiao Ya's maiden name. Therefore, he had given her his own surname and recognized her as his little sister. The water-like gaze of the chief of the Fair Maiden Peak fell upon Yi Zaiwen's body. However, it made him tremble with fear. My 10,000 Fathoms Peak is a 10,000 years old inheritance. I'll accept her as my last disciple if she enters my 10,000 Fathoms Peak. I'll empty my pocket in teaching her. The tone of the chief of the 10,000 Fathoms Peak appeared dull. However, he had spoken resolutely and decisively. Countless people in the surroundings felt a little dizzy as they heard this. Did he really just say last disciple? The ranking system formulated by the true Marshall University for general disciples wasn't as strict as it was for the registered disciples. However, the disciples were divided into a few categories like registered disciples, inner disciples, immediate disciples, and last disciples. The registered disciples were the most useless among all the categories. Their names were just registered in the university. That's all. They were sometimes allowed to listen to the major subjects when the class opened. Inner disciples were important, and immediate disciples were even more so. They were taught a lot of martial arts, which the inner disciples weren't. And the last disciples were the ones who would inherit the mantle of the teacher. Recruiting the last disciple meant that the teacher wouldn't admit new disciples. The teacher wouldn't preserve any resources from then onwards and would hand over everything to this last disciple. In layman's language, a last disciple would probably become a top-notch chief in the future. And they would at least become elders if they couldn't obtain the position of the chief. And such people occupied a very important place in the university. There were several hundred or several thousand disciples under the 10,000 fathoms peak's chief. He also had many immediate disciples and heaven's pride experts under him. However, this was the first time he had decided to accept someone as his last disciple. I've already said that I want to accept her as my last disciple. Dangyang Peak's chief didn't give up. He was the first one to have arrived here. He had recognized her talent first. Xiaoya has peak innate talent. Teaching such genius won't go in vain. This is a bright student. What if I don't receive any other disciple after her? All the other disciples have simply become trash in my opinion after I've watched her. 10,000 fathoms and Dangyang. Do you want to mislead her? Statecraft Institution's chief said, Yi will not only become my last disciple, but she will also receive full support from my statecraft institution in her cultivation if she joins my statecraft institution. Xiaoya looked at Yi Shiwen. She was also slightly confused at this time. Nothing had ever moved her emotionally so far apart from Yi Ziwen's matters. However, she also knew that her choice was related to her growth in the future. It was very important. Yi Shiwen stepped forward and said, all the teachers are very interested in my little sister. This boy can't thank you enough for that. However, little sister Xiaoyu is also only one person. It's impossible to make several copies of her. Every master is very much fond of little sister, and I appreciate your kindness. However, little sister has already given her consent to the Fair Maiden Peak. She has given her word that she'll join the Fair Maiden Peak, and it's not good to break promises. Yi Shiwen saluted them by raising his clasped hands after he said this. It was a standard greet. However, it wasn't because he was afraid of these four individuals' martial arts accomplishments. It was because these four individuals had shown a whole new level of respect for Xiaoya. They had been fighting and arguing over her. So, he had to thank them for this as her elder brother. However, he also thought about it. These four individuals' strength hardly differs. There's also hardly any difference in their qualifications. In fact, it's impossible for someone to have qualifications that are even more superior to those of them. He had chosen the Fair Maiden Peak in this condition. After all, he had already promised, and he couldn't back out now. Otherwise, he reckoned that the Fair Maiden Peak would hate him for this. Moreover, he genuinely believed that the Fair Maiden Peak would be the most appropriate for Xiaoya. Fair Maiden Peak's chief hadn't put forward any conditions. However, could a talented and powerful person like Xiaoya be afraid of not getting special treatment after she had joined Fair Maiden Peak? The faces of the chiefs of the Dangyang Peak, the 10,000 fathoms peak, and the statecraft institution sank as they heard Yi Ziwen's words. They hadn't expected that Yi Shiwen wouldn't wait for them to complete their conditions and would already decide that she would join the Fair Maiden Peak. They had immediately become depressed. However, they also had nothing to say since Yi Shiwen had said that Xiaoya had already decided to join the Fair Maiden Peak. She had just arrived for the qualification test now. She should already be considered as a person of the Fair Maiden Peak. It hadn't been fixed yet, but the biggest issue was that no one had put forward more generous terms than the others. However, they felt much better after they thought that even the other chiefs couldn't get hold of her. The complexion of the fair Maiden Peak's chief slightly cleared up after she heard Yi Zaiwen's words. The ice-cold expression on her face had also apparently reduced by a great extent. The resentment in her heart had also vanished. Her attitude towards Yi Shiwen hadn't been good earlier. After all, she would have gotten hold of Xiaoya and flown away if Yi Shiwen hadn't brought this disciple for the qualification test and made such a big noise. She was secretly angry with him. However, she was very impressed by him after she heard this sentence. Moreover, she couldn't show a scowling face to him after she had seen that he was Xiao Ya's elder brother. On the contrary, Yi Shiwen wasn't aware of the sudden change in the mood of the fair Maiden Peak's chief. He hadn't thought about this point from the start. Anyway, he had never met the fair Maiden Peak's chief before. He could just figure out from her unconventional appearance that she was a powerful chief and master of deception. It's indeed a pity. Such an extraordinary girl will be transformed into an iceberg by the fair maiden teachers. Dangyang Peak's chief said pitifully. More than half of the fair Maiden Peak's disciples had cold faces. Some people also jokingly called them a group of icebergs, and the biggest iceberg among them was naturally the fair Maiden Peak's chief. However, he felt that a strong killing intention had shrouded him. So, he decided not to speak further when he saw the murderous aura in the eyes of the fair Maiden Peak's chief. After all, he couldn't dare to provoke this ferocious woman. They couldn't make Xiaoya join their sections. However, she was still a disciple of their true martial university now. They could totally imagine how ferocious she would become after growing up in the future. The seven-colored aptitude was a legend among legends. As per the legends, only the first batch of the true martial university's ancestors had such qualifications which far surpassed the qualifications of ordinary people. That's why these chiefs had been attracted over here and had been fighting over her. They believed that she would soon cause a huge sensation in the entire true martial world. I have nothing to say since you've decided to join the Fair Maiden Peak. I had refined this inner armor in my free time when I had still been youthful. Dangyang Peak's chief sighed. He was feeling down. However, he also didn't nag any further. He just gave Xiaoyu an inner armor. This inner armor was emitting multicolored divine beams. That inner armor had a looming pressure which made people cry out in alarm. Great Sage Tool. This was a great sage tool. Everyone had almost fainted. Many people had never seen a great sage tool in their entire lives. In fact, even many great sages didn't have a great sage tool. And he had given away a great sage tool just like that. This was hard to imagine. Yi Shiwen tried his best not to get choked to death. This inner armor is a great sage tool. The sage experts can't hurt her if she has this thing to protect her body. In fact, she can even escape from the hands of an ordinary great sage. This gift was extremely precious, even if it might be nothing for them. Yi Shiwen thought about it once again. I've struggled so much in order to transform the heavenly source mirror into a great sage tool. And look at Xiaoya. She has effortlessly obtained a great sage-level inner armor. He immediately had an urge to vomit blood as he thought of this. This old guy has given you a present, so I won't be stingy. I had accidentally obtained this lady's sword once. This sword is useless for me, so I give it to you as a present today. 10,000 Fathoms Peak's chief wasn't stingy either. He gave her the long sword which had been made from an unknown jade. The entire sword was emitting dark green serene light. Moreover, the fluctuation of principles on this sword was as good as that on that inner armor. Great Sage Tool, another great sage tool. Many people nearly fainted. It's really a great sage tool. Is this really the way of this world? Is a great sage tool some roadside cabbage? Is it a pebble on the roadside that one can casually grab it? They've given away great sage tools one by one like cabbages. This matter alone was enough to cause a sensation throughout the true martial university after today. And Xiaoyu would also become famous in the entire university. I don't have those great sage tools to give you. However, it'll give you this immense righteousness scripture. Statecraft Institution's chief didn't give her a great sage tool. This made everyone heave a sigh of relief. However, they soon almost fainted once again. Great Spirit Scripture. This secret book wasn't some ordinary third-grade secret book. It was instead a martial art of the Statecraft Institution. It was the origin of all martial arts of the Statecraft Institution. And it was also the source of the 4 books and 5 classics of Confucianism. In layman's language, only a handful of the entire generations of the Statecraft Institution could obtain this secret book. An outsider couldn't even peep into the information present inside this secret book. But he had given it as a present to Xiaoya straight away. Oh my God! What in the world is this? It wasn't a great sage tool. It was much more precious than that. A great sage tool was nothing in front of this great spirit scripture. Statecraft Institution's chief was the most just and honest man among all of them. To be continued. Chapter 646. I can't thank all the senior masters enough, Fair Maiden Peak's chief said to all the chiefs. She was showing respect to them. She didn't say that she would give any gift to Xiaoya. After all, accepting her as her last disciple was already an enormous gift. So, she wouldn't want anything else when the time would come. Xiaoya looked at Yi Shiwen. She saw him nodding. She received the gifts from these 3 aloof chiefs, and then showed her courtesy to the Fair Maiden Peak's chief by kowtowing in front of her. She officially entered the Fair Maiden Peak with that. The 7-colored aptitude result on the qualification test steal, the incident of all the 4 chiefs fighting over Xiaoya, and the gifts that they had given her had made Xiaoya a sensation in the entire true martial university. This was just as Yi Shiwen had expected. Almost the entire true martial university had come to know that there was such a young girl who hadn't entered the university yet, but had already obtained the attention of all the high-level experts. Everyone knew that there was such a peerless genius. Xiaoya had obtained the attention of everyone on the Fair Maiden Peak soon after she had entered it. Everyone on the Fair Maiden Peak regarded her as a hope for the peak's rejuvenation. Fair Maiden Peak's chief had even sent a highly experienced great sage lady of the Fair Maiden Peak to guide Xiaoya in her cultivation. She would also give directions to her in her cultivation from time to time. Moreover, she had personally handed over the Fair Maiden scripture to Xiaoya. This scripture was the Fair Maiden Peak's martial art. Several experts were guarding her all the time so that the spies of the other forces present in the True Martial University couldn't assassinate her. The True Martial University had placed many spies in other forces in the countless previous years. However, the other forces had also placed many spies in the True Martial University. These spies might not have set out in their entire lives, and they may have remained hidden for generations. However, they would cause a huge threat if they attacked. Xiaoya's innate talent had already alarmed the entire True Martial University. She would at least become the chief of one of the top 10 big heritages in the future as per the talent revealed by her. They couldn't lose such a genius. Therefore, they must make preparations for her safety. Yi Shiwen had become relaxed after he had come to know about the treatment that Xiaoya had been receiving on the Fair Maiden Peak. He didn't know how much better she would become as compared to him after having been fully nurtured by the Fair Maiden Peak. Countless disciples were surprised once the news about these treatments transmitted outside. Forget about watching such treatments. They hadn't even heard about them. Even an ordinary Heaven's Pride expert wouldn't get such treatments after having entered the True Martial University. It was already considered as pretty good if a peak's chief would occasionally clear up their doubts. There's a so-called saying the master leads a disciple in their cultivation. The True Martial University had always felt that a person must depend on their own efforts for their cultivation. Many people couldn't officially become an apprentice to a master even after having cultivated for their entire lives. It was also not that easy to formally become an apprentice to a master in the True Martial University. After all, those masters themselves had to cultivate as well. Therefore, it was impossible for them to guide an individual all the time. Yi Shiwen had been cultivating by himself from the beginning, but he didn't find it inappropriate. After all, real strong experts would desire to walk on their own paths. It was impossible for them to follow the path of their predecessors. Yi Shiwen could finally begin his closed-door training without any scruples after he had helped Xiaoya join the Fair Maiden Peak. He had obtained a big harvest in this time's Devil World competition. He had obtained huge benefits from all directions. This had been a very rare opportunity for him. He had no status among the core disciples before he had gone to the devil world. But he had become widely famous as the strongest person under the great sage realm now. His foundation had also become stable after he had passed through numerous bloody battles. So, he had no worries about the future. Not only his strength had progressed, but he had obtained even more wealth in various forms. He had consumed the majority of wealth which he had plundered from those experts in the battles. He hadn't transformed them into primary essence to enhance his vitality. Instead, he had transformed them into real elemental energy and consumed them. However, he had obtained more than 1 billion primary spirit dawn. Even then, it looked like an extremely huge wealth. But then, who among those several hundred experts of the late stage of half-step great sage realm wasn't an elite expert among the core disciples? Therefore, the total wealth that he had accumulated from them was an astonishing figure. In fact, his wealth wouldn't have been only this much if he hadn't consumed so much of it in that battle. Yi Zaiwen's ranking wasn't high on the merit list. He had grabbed a rank among several hundred people even after having killed several hundred elite experts who had been ranked above him. However, he had later obtained rich rewards from the university. He had been rewarded 2 billion primary spirit dawn. And it must be mentioned that this amount was the sort of wealth a common great sage could accumulate in their entire life. Therefore, it couldn't be said that the true Martial University's reward wasn't generous this time. 2 billion primary spirit dawn wasn't an insane amount for Yi Shiwen. However, it was an astronomical wealth nonetheless. The high-level experts of the university hadn't said it clearly. However, Yi Shiwen knew that this must be the reward for killing an expert like Shou Kuan and those several hundred elites of the other forces. In fact, this happened in every force. The reward for killing devil experts would be publicly known, but the reward for killing the experts of other forces would be a secret. They would never declare it openly. Everyone knew this. Moreover, there were those 500 million primary spirit dawn, which Yi Shiwen already had. In other words, he now had 5 billion primary spirit dawn in his stock. Even an ordinary great sage couldn't imagine possessing so much wealth. In fact, even Yi Shiwen couldn't consume this amount of wealth within a short time. However, the precondition was that he mustn't summon the Star Colossus avatar every now and then. The Star Colossus avatar was indeed a bottomless pit. 5 billion primary spirit dawn could only make it fight 7 times, which wasn't a good enough insurance for Yi Shiwen. Moreover, the consumption of primary spirit dawn had also increased multiple times along with the exponential promotion of its strength. That's why Yi Shiwen eagerly wanted to promote his own strength. There would be no need to seek help from the Star Colossus avatar after he had entered the Great Sage realm. He wouldn't need to call the Star Colossus avatar, at least under normal circumstances, after that. Even Yi Shiwen didn't know to what extent the strength of the Star Colossus avatar could increase. After all, it was just in its young stage. The Star Colossus might surpass the Great Sage realm after his blood slave would completely integrate into it. The entire potential of the Star Colossus avatar would get pulled out at that time. Then, it would be impossible to extract any further potential by simply integrating the blood slave further into the Star Colossus. And the leftover potential would be used to let the Star Colossus grow little by little with time. However, Yi Shiwen couldn't help but have a headache when he thought about the Star Colossus growth cycle. That's because their growth cycle easily fell in a range of 10,000 to 100,000 years. However, this would surely happen after a very long time. Yi Zaiwen's fighting prowess would reach above Great Sage realm if the Star Colossus avatar surpassed the Great Sage realm. He would become the strongest person in the entire world at that time. However, those things were too far away in the future. The most important thing for the current Yi Shiwen was to think about making the breakthrough into the initial stage of half-step Great Sage realm. Then, he could even contend against the experts of the initial stage of Great Sage realm by coordinating with the strength of the Heavenly Source Mirror. Moreover, he would be able to do it by depending upon his own strength, and not depending upon the Star Colossus avatar's strength. So, this would be the qualitative change and leap. Yi Shiwen was just a tiny step away from these things now. The half-step Great Sage Realm and the Great Sage Realm differed by just one layer of window paper. Half-step, half-step. They indeed just differed by half-step. The transformation of body would take place in the Sage Realm, and the Great Sage Realm would transform the soul. And half-step Great Sage Realm was where the transformation of soul would begin. The transformation of soul would complete after passing through the initial stage, intermediate stage, and late stage. And a person would smoothly enter the Great Sage Realm. It was very hard to cross this step for ordinary people. It was just like entering into semi-sage realm from legendary realm. After all, this transformation must take place in one's essence. However, this wasn't an issue for Yi Shiwen since he had already completed the transformation of soul. His soul had already completely transformed earlier. The process of stepping into Great Sage Realm from half-step Great Sage Realm involved both qualitative as well as quantitative change. Yi Shiwen had already completed the process of qualitative change. So, the grade of his soul didn't differ from that of a great sage. However, his capacity differed from that of a great sage. The quantity of energy that he had accumulated was still equal to that of a sage expert. Therefore, he still needed to accumulate. He would smoothly advance into the half-step Great Sage Realm as long as he completed the accumulation. The thing that was extremely difficult for other people was just like a casual push for him. It was nothing. Endless primary spirit dawn began to burn inside the heavenly source mirror. They then transformed into spirit energies and crashed into Yi Shiwen's body. He needed the supplement of endless spirit energies in order to carry out the quantitative change. Inside a private room on the hidden star peak, the spirit energies were gradually entering into his body. And the observing person scripture was operating frantically inside his body. The small universe inside his body was also rotating unceasingly. It seemed as if the entire universe was condensing together, and the entire solar system was spinning. His observing person scripture had reached to the peak, the so-called bottleneck. The entire solar system had already been formed. All the things that he could recall had already been added, and the perfect solar system had already appeared in his body. Yi Shiwen had already completed the most difficult process of qualitative change. However, even the most basic quantitative change wasn't that simple. Many people would spend 100 years in completing each process of qualitative and quantitative change respectively. It required a very long time to have such accumulation. However, Yi Shiwen had unimaginable wealth. His wealth could be described as an astronomical amount without an issue as long as he didn't use it for calling the star Colossus avatar. His process of quantitative change was also taking place frantically and at an incredible speed under the huge influx of spirit energies. His inner solar system was also climbing gradually at a speed that could be clearly seen with the naked eye. Time had been passing year by year. 3 years' time seemed to have passed within the blink of an eye. Moreover, Yi Shiwen's reputation of the strongest person under the Great Sage Realm that had been established by him had also died gradually along with the time. Bang! A boundless aura swept out from the hidden star peak. Ah! And finally, a half-step Great Sage. To be continued. Chapter 647. Yi Shiwen closed his eyes. He felt as if all the principles in his body were in his control. This was a completely different feeling from when he was in the sage accomplished realm. He felt completely changed now that he had crossed this step. After all, it was half step into the great sage realm. All kinds of principles became increasingly clear to him. The more formidable the soul and essence of a person would be, the faster they would understand the principles. He had made the breakthrough within a few years. This was hugely related to the fact that his soul had already been transformed in its entirety. His soul had already transformed. So, it was as if a great sage was trying to comprehend the sage realm's principles, martial arts, and so on. So, how could his speed be slow? He had spent 3 years in crossing this step. However, he knew that he had achieved it more easily as compared to other people. After all, many people would remain stuck at this doorstep and wouldn't be able to cross it for their entire lives. He would have to cross 2 more steps after having completed this step of quantitative change. Then, he would be able to smoothly enter the Great Sage realm. He was very confident about it. However, he had consumed 1 billion primary spirit dawn just for crossing this step of quantitative change. He was accustomed to this much consumption. However, he still felt that he had consumed a terrifying amount of primary spirit dawn. This is just the initial stage of half-step Great Sage realm. So, how will the consumption be less in the future? I would need an astronomical amount of primary spirit dawn in order to enter the Great Sage realm. These investments would appear valuable at that time. Then, Yi Shiwen could dare to challenge even an expert of the initial stage of Great Sage realm, depending upon the strength of the initial stage of half-step Great Sage realm and the coordination of the heavenly source mirror. This would be the first time when he would be able to challenge a great sage without drawing support from the strength of the Star Colossus avatar. The Star Colossus was allowing the Blood Slave to merge into it more easily as its owner was getting more and more formidable. It had already rushed to the peak of the Great Sage realm within such a short time by surpassing the late stage of the Great Sage realm. The Star Colossus soul that had initially been captured had almost been consumed in the process. Ordinary methods were useless if he wanted to promote the strength of the Star Colossus avatar. Yi Shiwen even thought of going out to the foreign battlefield in the outer space, extracting that sealed Star Colossus soul, and refining it into a blood slave. After all, his Star Colossus avatar's cultivation speed would increase significantly if he did that. Even he wouldn't be able to catch up with its speed then. However, he just thought about it and nothing more. He wasn't so insane that he would implement it. It's a Star Colossus that feeds on planets. Just that cub inside the heavenly source mirror has reached above Great Sage accomplished realm in its peak phase. And that monster who has been suppressed in the foreign battlefield is an adult Star Colossus. It is said to have even slaughtered a dragon. It had made the entire true martial world panic at the slightest move. It's a dreadful monster that has made the entire true martial university thoroughly decline to this extent from its flourishing period. Several elders of the true martial university had paid the price with their blood back then. All the inheritances had perished one by one. They hadn't been able to kill it even after having paid such a price. They could only manage to seal it. So, one can well imagine how formidable this monster is. Yi Shiwen had been just a legendary disciple earlier. He could just imagine how formidable Great Sage experts and experts above Great Sage realm were. Therefore, he hadn't felt that Star Colossus was abnormally formidable. After all, it had been sealed by the true martial university. However, he now felt that he had been very naive at that time now as he thought about it. I had been as naive as a child. I had been like an ant that had been trying to guess the broadness of the sky. It seems fascinating now. The entire true martial world will perish if this monster accidentally gets released. The true martial university had almost been destroyed by it, even though it had been in its peak phase back then. So, one can well imagine what would happen to the current true martial university if that monster got released. However, this temptation was still floating in his heart. After all, this was an extremely fast method of making a breakthrough. He could vaguely feel that the entire true martial world would sink into turmoil soon. After all, more and more forces of the universe had begun to spy on the true martial world. He didn't know the reason for this. However, it didn't look good. This meant that the order that had been maintained by the true martial world for countless years might break down. And turmoil and conflagration of war would get spread if this order broke down. It would be a turmoil which might cause the fall of countless experts. After all, the true martial world's big shots would have no choice but to go all out in a war if the foreign forces targeted true martial world. The heaven would be destroyed and Earth would get extinguished if the big forces collided. It would be the end of the world. The sage experts would appear ridiculously weak in such a level of collision. Great sages would also only have the strength to protect themselves. Only a person with strength equal to that of a supreme lord might be able to stand any chance in that case. This was merely Yi Ziwen's speculation, and he didn't have any real proof. But more and more signs were pointing in this direction. However, this had made Yi Shiwen feel an urgency to increase his strength. He could barely manage to defend himself as per his current strength, even with the help of the Star Colossus avatar. He didn't need to worry about protecting himself as long as he didn't come across a character of the Supreme Lord's level. However, he still had many friends and close relatives in the true martial world. He might not be able to protect them by himself, no matter what. Everyone would be in terrible danger if the fight took place. Therefore, he must promote his strength to the greatest extent before that. Therefore, the Star Colossus that had been sealed in the foreign battlefield was a big temptation for Yi Shiwen. He believed that he would reach heaven in a single bound if he succeeded. However, he soon suppressed the temptation that had aroused in his heart. He was rash and impetuous in the opinions of ordinary people, and had done many shocking things. For example, he had clashed with the law enforcement hall's people and killed their disciples after he had entered the true martial university. He had wiped out several hundred experts of the late stage of half-step Great Sage realm in the Devil World competition. That was simply unprecedented. Overall, he had left a reckless guy's impression in the people's minds. However, they didn't know that Yi Shiwen would think over and over again before doing something he needed to do. He had an urge to do quite many things. However, he had done them only after having thought carefully. He had also taken some risks. However, he would rarely do things without using his brain. He had strong control over himself. It was hard for the outsiders to imagine it. Therefore, he decided to give up this matter, even if it was extremely tempting after he thought about the consequences of failure. However, this matter had taken root in his heart now. He decided that he would wait until his strength increased even further in the future. He would think about this matter again when he would have certainty. He wouldn't do anything in which he didn't have complete assurance. A group of sharp visions were sweeping inside the true martial university. However, they were cut off by the matrix barrier that had been laid on top of the hidden star peak. After all, these were the matrix formations of one of the former top 10 big inheritances. The vision of an ordinary person couldn't sweep in. Yi Zaiwen's expression was calm and composed. He had established distinguished merit in this Devil World competition, and many high-level experts of the university were optimistic about him. However, there were also many people who possessed enmity for him. The strongest person under the Great Sage realm meant that that person was invincible in the Sage realm. This was a huge title. Yi Shiwen retracted his aura, and those countless visions immediately went away. He then strode out. He transformed into a streamer of light, disappeared into the horizon, and flew outside the university. His flying speed had increased even further after having made the breakthrough into half-step Great Sage realm. He could easily surpass the speed of an expert of the initial stage of Great Sage realm, even without opening his devil wings. The foreign battlefield was extremely dangerous for the old Yi Shiwen. However, it was nothing for the current Yi Shiwen. Those star beasts that had been trying to stop him couldn't reach near him. They got crushed and turned into fragments by the real elemental energy that was protecting his body. There was no difference between these legendary demon beasts and ants for him now. They couldn't stop him from advancing. They got wiped out by him in a large area, and vacuum was formed wherever he went. He had already reached the Wind Dragon City within an hour. His strength had advanced by leaps and bounds as compared to the last time when he had arrived in the Wind Dragon City. He couldn't go to the foreign battlefield to look for that Star Colossus. However, he thought of another way. The Dragon's Vein, which he had locked up on the Wind Dragon's planet. A Dragon's Vein was not only capable of supporting the energy needs of a big force. It would also give birth to countless spirit arteries which would control the sex destiny. Even the true martial university had only a few Dragon's Veins. However, Yi Shiwen hadn't been capable of taking a Dragon's Vein away the last time. He had just been able to lock the Dragon's Vein therein by using the Trapping Dragon technique. And his strength could be compared to that of a great sage now. Therefore, he must see whether he could absorb and take away this Dragon's Vein or not. His accumulation would rise forever if he possessed a Dragon's Vein. Not only his strength would advance by leaps and bounds, but the enlightening mind ancient tree would also grow more quickly. After all, the enlightening mind ancient tree had been growing on this Dragon's Vein earlier, and Yi Shiwen had taken it away by force. He was now feeding the enlightening mind ancient tree by burning countless primary spirit dawn every day. How much time he would be able to save if he possessed this dragon's vein. What was most important was that it would slowly transform his qualifications in the long run. There's a so-called saying a place derives reflected glory from an illustrious sun. So, a place that is spiritually soothing and beautiful is more likely to have geniuses and outstanding talents. Even a world-shaking person can appear at a place that has a dragon's vein. One can have a meteoric rise in such a place. They can reach all the way to the heaven. Things like destiny, which would look illusory at first, would start to look real. Yi Shiwen attracted the attentions of countless experts as soon as he arrived in the Wind Dragon City. He had been only a little famous the last time he had arrived in the Wind Dragon City. He had established a reputation more than a decade ago by winning the martial arts championship. However, the situation was different now. He had come into the limelight with the end of the Devil World competition 3 years ago. Is he Yi Shiwen? I've seen him once before. I hadn't expected that he would grow at such fast speed. The last time that I had seen him had been in the battle that had taken place between him and Xian Yuan Palace Hall's Pang Yongbo. Both of them had been Young Heaven's Pride experts at that time. However, it's astonishing that Yi Shiwen has become invincible under the Great Sage Realm in just a matter of few years. Yi Shiwen is exceptional. It seems from the way he looks now that he has become even more tyrannical than earlier. To be continued. Chapter 648. He's the so-called strongest person under the Great Sage Realm? It's really laughable. He has just killed some low-level experts of the true martial world and dares to claim this title. He's really ignorant and fearless. A young man who was in a restaurant narrowed his eyes. He was dressed in a magnificent embroidered robe. He looked at Yi Shiwen with a slightly cold expression. Yi Shiwen was mixed in the crowd in the street. Yi Shiwen had never restrained his aura on purpose. However, his restraining breath technique had already reached to an extremely superior realm. Therefore, he didn't need to operate it all the time. He would look like an expert of the initial stage of half-step Great Sage Realm unless he deliberately released his imposing aura. There were a few young men and women around him. They were dressed in similar magnificent embroidered robes. Every one of them had restrained their aura. Bright rays of light were flickering in their eyes. They had profound martial power, and the principles had congealed around them. Each of them was a dreadful person who differed just a bit from the Great Sage Realm. The strongest person among them was as good as Bai Jingwei. In fact, his strength had slightly surpassed that of Bai Jingwei. Especially, the aura of that young man who had just spoken up was as strong as that of Shou Kun. The sheer might of this group was simply unimaginable. A youth who was dressed in a yellow robe was in this group. He was sitting in his seat and looked calm and composed. He didn't pay attention to that embroidered robed youth's words. Yeah, these natives of the true martial world consider their world as the entire world. How can anyone among them deserve to be the strongest under the Great Sage Realm? They are just some aboriginals who have lost their ancestral glory. Yeah, they don't have their past glory now. Only some stupid aboriginals are left. The other disciples also agreed one after another. Their faces were filled with pride. They looked down on the entire true martial world. It seemed as if the experts of the entire true martial world were weaklings in their opinion. He, strongest person under the Great Sage Realm of the True Martial University. The True Martial University will soon become just a name in the history. You say, how do you think those old guys of the True Martial University would react if I suddenly attacked and killed this so-called strongest person under the Great Sage Realm? A ridiculous and tyrannical expression flashed on that embroidered-robed youth's face. It seemed as if he wasn't afraid of the True Martial University's might. Jing Yuan, don't mess around. The so-called strongest person under the Great Sage Realm of the true martial world is of little value. However, he must have some knack since he has obtained this title. Be careful, or you'll overturn in the gutter, the yellow-robed youth said. He had apparently warned that embroidered-robed youth. However, There was still no respect for the true martial world in that embroidered-robed youth's words. What the people of true martial world considered a legendary accomplishment was merely some knack in his opinion. He'll make a move when necessary. Brother Lao, how can you set into action for something like this? You just need to look at it. The embroidered-robed youth looked respectfully at that yellow-robed youth and said, Yes, yes, Brother Lao. We won't be able to watch if you attack. Crushing that Yi Shiwen is extremely easy for you. Other people also showed their consent one after another. They looked relaxed. It seemed as if they were just watching a monkey show and weren't the least bit excited. All of you are overestimating the true martial university. The embroidered-robed youth, Lu Jingyuan, laughed and said. His eyes were locked upon Yi Shiwen. People of our school are too prudent. It doesn't matter if we kill the people of the true martial world. They'll soon become history anyway. Lu Jingyuan sneered, and then suddenly moved. He transformed into a streamer of light and immediately arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. A slap swept out towards Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if he didn't only want to defeat Yi Shiwen, but wanted to defeat him in the most humiliating way. He deliberately wanted to humiliate him. How powerful would the strength of a senior expert of the half-step Great Sage realm be? Especially, nobody could imagine how powerful the strength of a half-step Great Sage expert who was comparable to Shokuin would be. Lu Jingyuan felt that he had won after he saw that Yi Shiwen didn't seem to react. A smile full of pride flashed on his face. However, his proud appearance didn't stay for a long time as he saw a sword coming head-on towards him. It seemed as if it would definitely cut him into two halves in the next second. Lu Jingyuan's reaction wasn't slow. He fiercely trod and moved away from his current position. He retreated dozens of feet in order to avoid this sword light. He finally managed the speed and came to a halt. The frivolous expression had vanished from his face by now. Instead, his expression had become solemn. He still didn't think that any man of the true martial world deserved the title of the strongest person under the Great Sage realm. However, he didn't dare to be negligent like before. He indeed has a few tricks up his sleeves. An expert of the initial stage of half-step Great Sage realm had forced him to retreat in one sword attack. This was enough to stun everyone. An expert of the initial stage of half-step Great Sage realm, and an expert of late stage of half-step Great Sage realm like him, who was just slightly away from entering the Great Sage realm, weren't on the same level at all. Who are you? Yi Shiwen frowned and asked. Lu Jingyuan couldn't see through Yi Ziwen's martial power, since Yi Shiwen had perfected the restraining breath technique to the peak. However, Yi Shiwen could see through his cultivation in one glance. It was as good as that of Shokuin. Such people weren't commonly seen. There was a massive disparity among the strengths of the experts of the late-stage half-step Great Sage realm, even if they were in the same realm. A person who had cultivated to the level of Shokuin must be an elite even among the Heaven's Pride experts. An ordinary person couldn't cultivate to this extent. These kind of people weren't many in the true martial world. And one such person had appeared here now. You're a member of the Emergent School? Yi Shiwen recognized him as soon as he saw the symbol on his shoulder. It wasn't that he had come across a member of the Emergent School for the first time. Therefore, they were no stranger to him. I hadn't expected you to have such strength of vision. Lu Jingyuan laughed. A ridiculous look appeared on his face. He then looked at Yi Shiwen and said, Strongest person under the Great Sage realm. Ah, an ignorant and fearless person deserves this title. A group of aboriginals are claiming to be invincible in the entire world. Aboriginal? Yi Ziwen's complexion immediately changed. These people of the Emergent School consider true martial world's people as aboriginals. It wasn't that only Yi Ziwen's reaction had been so. The complexions of the majority of experts present in the surroundings had changed since all of them were true martial world's experts. Lu Jingyuan's words meant that they considered them as ignorant aboriginals. It was a clear slap on their faces. He had trampled their self-respect under his foot. Ah, Lu Jingyuan, you're too blunt. You're no better than these aboriginals. The mocking voices of Lu Jingyuan's fellow disciples came from the restaurant. It seemed as if they were mocking Lu Jingyuan. However, They had looked down upon these experts of the true martial world in reality. Yi Shiwen shot a glance. He was slightly amazed. All these disciples are top-notch Heaven's Pride experts. Each of them is a ferocious figure of the half-step great sage realm who can sweep away a large area. They are going too far. These people of the emergent school are too self-opinionated. Do they consider themselves gods? How dare they call us indigenous? This is aggravating. It's intolerable. More and more people of the emergent school have arrived here this time. So, are they planning to build their stronghold here? The unscrupulous teasing words of the emergent school's people had infuriated several experts of the true martial world. Only a small portion of disciples among them belonged to the true martial university, and the majority of disciples were of other forces. However, all of them had stood on the same side at this time. All of them were representing the dignity of the true martial world's experts. Humph! I allowed him to attack. Otherwise, it's extremely easy for me to catch him, Lu Jingyuan unscrupulously retorted while facing his mate's teases. He pretended that he was talking in a calm and cool manner. Lu Jingyuan looked at Yi Shiwen after he said this. He then opened his mouth and said fiercely, "What strongest person under the great sage realm? I'll let you know how laughable you are today. You're just a group of ignorant and narrow-minded aboriginals." The entire street turned quiet. The faces of all the experts of the true martial world were brimming with anger. However, they didn't dare to speak anything. After all, the enemy was an expert of the emergent school, and it was obviously a formidable force that was leading a big world in the depths of the starry universe. Moreover, that big world wasn't any less than the true martial world. So, one could well imagine how formidable the emergent school would be. After all, it was leading the emergence world. Perhaps only the true martial university in its flourishing period had assets and strength on the same level as them. Lu Jingyuan moved. A fist swept out, and the entire space ferociously twisted. It was boiling just like boiling water. The fist emitted endless divine beams. They seemed to be magnificent rays of light that would tear the sky and reveal the grandeur of another world. The faces of countless people exposed a terrified look. This was Emergence School's martial technique, Emergence God's Fist. This was a set of supreme God's Fist technique of the Emergence School. Several experts of the Emergence School had established outstanding achievements in the starry sky with the help of this technique. One fist could display a magnificent scene of levitating heavenwards. The Emergent School was unlike the other forces. It had always tried to levitate heavenwards, break the barrier to this existence, and become immortals. This was just a legend. However, one could well imagine how vigorous and ambitious this Emergent School, which had founded the technique of Emergence God's Fist, was. There was another advanced world in the Emergent School's fables. They used to call it as the world of immortals. A person could break through the barrier of this existence after they had cultivated to a certain extent. Then, they could levitate heavenwards, fly to the other world, and become immortal. And those people who would become immortals would have endless life. They would forever enjoy the good fortunes of an immortal life. Some people used to say that the Emergent School had once tried to teach their disciples the method of levitating heavenwards and reaching to the world of immortals. They had failed. However, nobody had dared to belittle them because of their strength and background. The entire world seemed to have landed into a country of immortals as Lu Jingyuan shot a punch. Countless immortals were flying in the sky. The heavenly music was playing in the depths of the sky. Golden lotuses had sprouted on the ground. It was an extraordinary scene everywhere. However, murderous aura was present everywhere. Those immortals, golden lotuses, and strange immortal beasts on the mountains had formed from Lu Jingyuan's real elemental energies. Every wisp of them contained exceptional murderous aura which could crush a person into fine dust. It was said that the practitioners of Emergence God's Fist could build a country of immortals if they cultivated it to the peak. A domain of immortals without foundation could be born out of thin air. Everyone would be as weak as ants in front of this domain of immortals that consisted of countless immortals. Nobody could contend against it. Yi Shiwen moved while everyone exclaimed. Then a big hand interweaved as it swept out. That big hand traveled back and forth in Lu Jingyuan's domain of immortals. It couldn't stop his big hand. Bang! The sound of a tight slap on the face reverberated. To be continued. Chapter 649. Bang! The loud sound of slap on the face reverberated. It wasn't too loud. However, it had strangely spread throughout the city. That country of immortals had immediately broken down along with the sound of the slap. The grand magnificent scene collapsed, transformed into a light spot, and disappeared into the sky. Lu Jingyuan screamed. One side of his face had already swollen, and he looked unrecognizable as a result. His mouthful of teeth had broken down into halves. He looked incomparably miserable. He was stunned. He hadn't anticipated that this would be the outcome. Yi Shiwen had effortlessly crushed his emergence god's fist. He had crushed his domain of immortals in just a slap, and also crushed his fist in tension. What kind of dreadful strength was this? He wanted to humiliate Yi Shiwen and give him a tight slap on his face. However, Yi Shiwen had conversely given him a tight slap on his face and left him disoriented. His entire skull had been almost entirely crushed by Yi Shiwen. This outcome was a big humiliation for him. He had never faced such humiliation. He had thought that he was a top-notch Heaven's Pride expert of the emergence school. When had he gotten humiliated like this before? He had always used this method to humiliate others. However, he had never thought that he himself would face such humiliation one day, and that too by an aboriginal of the true martial world who he looked down upon. Aboriginal? Yi Shiwen grinned. He let out a disdainful smile from the corner of his mouth. It seemed as if he was laughing at Lu Jingyuan's incompetence. Perhaps those experts of the emergence school still would have been mocking Yi Shiwen if it were a moment earlier. However, it was now evident that Yi Shiwen truly had such strength, and that his title was genuine. Ah! Won't you dare to look down upon us? Ignorant and narrow-minded aboriginals. Emergence school is merely so. Emergence school is also a mediocre bunch. Won't this Lu Jingyuan act arrogantly this time? He didn't show respect to the experts of our true martial world. It's good that someone has made him understand just how formidable the experts of my true martial world are. Yi Shiwen is extremely formidable. Lu Jingyuan's strength wasn't bad by any means. It seemed as if his domain of immortals would suppress and break down the void. I reckon that an ordinary expert of the late stage of half-step Great Sage realm would have been suppressed to death by the domain of immortals. However, it has been crushed by Yi Shiwen in just one slap. He really deserves the title of the strongest person under the Great Sage realm. He possesses an unimaginable amount of strength. Such a formidable person is under the Great Sage realm. How hasn't he entered the Great Sage realm already? Perhaps the outcome will be the same even if he comes across a great sage. Everyone had begun to discuss spiritedly. Especially, they had been almost scared to death by Yi Ziwen's dreadful strength. After all, they had never thought that the emergence god's fist would be extinguished this effortlessly. Yi Shiwen merely smiled. It seemed as if he was mocking a guy who had overreached himself. He looked down on him. Moreover, he didn't want to waste time on him. There wasn't anything more important in his mind than that dragon's vein. His strength could progress by leaps and bounds within a short time only if he obtained that dragon's vein. He would have enough strength to protect himself for these forthcoming troubled times. Moreover, this Lu Jingyuan of the emergent school was just a jumping clown in his opinion. He could have become a nuisance for Yi Shiwen 3 years ago. After all, he was equally matched to Shokuin. He had been no joke. However, he was nothing but an ignorant clown for the current Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen turned around and left. He didn't shoot another glance at him. Damn it! Lu Jingyuan felt extraordinary shame and humiliation as he saw Yi Shiwen ignoring him. He felt as if Yi Shiwen considered him insignificant like an ant. He couldn't accept this. Die for me! Lu Jingyuan's face was filled with exceptional resentment. He clenched his fist, and endless spirit energies coagulated on his body. The heavenly music turned on, and immortals began to fly. Another domain of immortals formed on the spot and slammed towards Yi Shiwen, who had already turned around. Careful! Countless people exclaimed in alarm. It didn't matter whether they cared about Yi Shiwen or not. They were standing on his side right now. After all, Lu Jingyuan and these people of the emergent school were extremely arrogant. They didn't have any respect for the true martial world's people. So, they would naturally stand on Yi Zaiwen's side this time. That domain of immortals seemed like a country that had existed since eternity as it suddenly smashed down upon Yi Shiwen. Clang, a metal clanging sound was heard. Then a group of sword lights appeared just like the sword god that had reincarnated from ancient times. It was a sword that could cut open the world and split the dark blue space. The sword lights shook the entire world as that sword instantly broke into that domain of immortals. This was a sword that could extinguish the world. Countless immortals roared inside that domain of immortals. They issued all kinds of immortal barriers towards those sword lights. However, they proved to be nothing in front of this incomparably formidable sword light. This represented the so-called saying, one sword can break 10,000 laws. Any kind of techniques and methods were jokes in front of this incredible sword light. They had been entirely cut open in a split second. The entire domain of immortals had been slashed through by the sword. The entire domain of immortals with its eternal power once again collapsed. The boundless fist intention was also instantly pierced by the long sword. Bang! The entire domain of immortals began to disintegrate. It transformed into a stream of light and disappeared. Acting recklessly, Yi Shiwen coldly snorted. He went along with his sword and appeared in front of Lu Jingyuan in an instant. He looked grave and stern. He had earlier ignored Lu Jingyuan. He also didn't want to waste time on him. However, Lu Jingyuan had attacked from behind, and this had thoroughly infuriated him. He had earlier believed that it was unworthy to kill Lu Jingyuan. However, he didn't care about it now. The sword in his hand that had been condensed from the sword intention swept out and went straight towards Lu Jingyuan. Yi Zaiwen's figure grew bigger and bigger in Lu Jingyuan's eyes as Yi Zaiwen's longsword was also getting closer and closer to him. A look of horror appeared on his face, and he almost screamed, "Stop!" An incomparably dreadful coercion smashed down from top of the restaurant. A mighty, imposing aura immediately shrouded the entire city, especially at the spot where Yi Shiwen was standing. This endless and majestic power transformed into a domain of immortals and smashed down. Yi Zaiwen's expression turned serious. This man has instilled the martial arts into his imposing aura. He can give rise to the supreme will of his martial art if he sets free his imposing aura. Great sage! Yi Shiwen concentrated. A great sage of the emergent school was hidden inside that restaurant. So what if it's a great sage? Yi Shiwen let out a cold smile. Then his long sword suddenly changed its direction. It then went upward straight towards the domain of immortals that was smashing down. Bang! Two peerless, terrifying powers collided in the sky. The collision immediately set out shock waves that destroyed even the atoms. A dreadful mushroom cloud slowly rose in the sky. This was a collision between two powers that could extinguish the world. The dreadful fluctuations swept out swirling in the air. The matrix barriers in the Wind Dragon City resurrected endlessly in a flash. They firmly stopped these dreadful shock waves and didn't let them destroy the entire Wind Dragon City. It wasn't clear until now how many times the Wind Dragon City's matrix formations had already been reinforced for situations like this. Yi Shiwen sneered in the face of these dreadful shock waves. The terrifying astral wind was blowing his clothes, and the fluttering sound echoed. He shot a fist. It transformed into a big star and suddenly swept towards Lu Jingyuan, who was feeling lucky after having escaped just a moment ago. Bang! Lu Jingyuan could only watch Yi Zaiwen's fist getting closer and closer. This fist finally struck his sea of energy. Bang! His entire sea of energy was invaded by a dreadful power, and it finally shattered into pieces. His martial art cultivation and his sea of energy were exploded by Yi Zaiwen's punch. It seemed as if he had passed through a terrifying battle of extinction. He seemed to be dead, really dead. His martial arts cultivation was everything for him. After all, what was he without his martial arts cultivation? He was just an insignificant ant. A person's martial arts cultivation was everything in this world where only powerhouses were respected. A person would be nothing without their martial arts cultivation. He opened his eyes wide, but his entire body went out flying upside down before he could say anything. He flew away just like a stringless kite. Bang! Lu Jingyuan's body ferociously knocked against a building, and the terrifying force swept away everything in the vicinity. His body collided with a reinforced wall. However, cracks appeared on the wall. Then, the densely packed traces of cracks proliferated in all directions, just like a spider's web. Bang! Lu Jingyuan's body smashed down on the ground after he collided with the wall, and a black crater was formed. The dreadful strength proliferated through the wall and broke down the entire building. It took a long time to describe all these things. However, everything had happened in an instant. Everyone was left dumbstruck as they saw this scene before their eyes. They looked at Yi Shiwen, and the expressions in their eyes made it seem as if they were watching a mythical god. They had just now felt that power that was enough to make them shudder. It was obvious that a great sage had attacked. Moreover, he was a strong person in the great sage realm. They didn't feel that it was some basic great sage's attack. However, they could truly feel that it was a great sage. After all, a great sage couldn't be faked. Yi Shiwen was known as the strongest person under the great sage realm. He was number one. He was an unrivaled king. However, it didn't matter which title he had since the precondition was that it was under the great sage realm. It wouldn't be strange if he defeated any enemy under the great sage realm, no matter who. Therefore, nobody was surprised on seeing that he had defeated Lu Jingyuan, even though he had done it so effortlessly. However, he had resisted the suppression of a great sage. How terrifying was this? The suppressive power of a great sage was enough to kill countless sage experts, even if a great sage didn't attack personally. Therefore, it was a matter of glory for all sage experts if they could escape from the hands of a great sage. Nobody among the sages could ever dare to say that they could contend against a great sage. Moreover, it was quite clear that the opposite party was a powerhouse in the great sage realm. SSS. He has become stronger than 3 years ago. An expert who had participated in the Devil World competition 3 years ago was among the crowd. He couldn't help but hold his breath and shout as he saw this scene. "Well, you're a courageous dog." A cold shout came from the restaurant. Then a yellow figure dashed out from inside. To be continued. Chapter 650. Chapter 650. Fighting against a great sage? It's a miracle. "Well, you're a courageous dog." A cold shout came from that restaurant. Then a yellow figure dashed out from inside. Simultaneously, the mighty and boundless coercion of a great sage pressed down upon Yi Zaiwen's body. It was so immensely heavy that it could suppress even a senior half-step great sage expert to death. It set off boundless astral wind that blew Yi Zaiwen's clothes. A sound of fluttering of clothes echoed as a result. The astral wind scraped at his skin like a knife and issued a metal clanging. People didn't know whether to call the astral wind dreadful or to say that Yi Zaiwen's skin was incredibly hard. Yi Shiwen raised his head and saw that boundless suppressive power of the great sage expert didn't cause a very big effect on him. This great sage power was enough to make the experts of below great sage realm lose their fighting prowess. It would seem like the organism at the bottom of the food chain had come across the one at the top of the food chain. They would only shiver, crouch, and welcome their death. However, that was true only for ordinary people. Yi Shiwen had already completed the transformation of his soul, so there wasn't any qualitative difference between him and a great sage. There was only quantitative difference between them. Therefore, this suppressive power which could crush the soul of a person had no effect on him. A yellow-robed youth appeared before Yi Zaiwen's eyes. He had the vigor of a dragon and the ferocity of a tiger. His handsome face was filled with a cold expression at the moment. His eyes revealed a murderous intent. And this murderous intent was locked on Yi Shiwen. The boundless pressure crashed down. It was getting heavier and heavier. It seemed as if Yi Shiwen would get crushed under it. However, Yi Zaiwen's complexion didn't change despite this desperate situation. However, that yellow-robed youth, senior brother Lao, merely sneered again and said, "Well, the courageous dog is indeed quite crazy." He completely unleashed his imposing aura. The dreadful strength of the peak of the initial stage of Great Sage Realm was completely revealed. His aura was slightly unstable, so he must have only recently entered the Great Sage Realm. However, he had entered the peak of the initial stage of Great Sage Realm, relying upon his profound foundation. This meant that he would soon enter the intermediate stage of Great Sage Realm. Shokun was also so back then. However, this yellow-robed youth before his eyes was obviously much more formidable than Shokun. Shokun had been mainly dependent upon his accumulation of several hundred years. But this man before his eyes was incomparably tyrannical. He was even more formidable than Shokun. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Yi Shiwen coldly smiled. "You're just a filthy pig, and you've dared to shame my true martial world. I would have trampled you to death if I hadn't seen Emergent School's emblem." A group of youngsters on top of that restaurant looked at Yi Shiwen with ugly complexions. The complexion of that yellow-robed youth, senior brother Lao, also turned exceptionally ugly. He said, Whoa. You're just an insignificant expert of the initial stage of half-step Great Sage Realm, and you dare to insult a Great Sage. I, Lao Yi, am quite the rash person myself. You might be a reckless and arrogant guy, and you might even be the strongest person under Great Sage Realm. However, they'll let you know the strength of a Great Sage today. That yellow-robed youth, Lao Yi, stepped forward after saying this. Then his aura suddenly rose by countless times and became as heavy as a mountain. It then smashed down upon Yi Shiwen to crush him. However, he also knew that Yi Shiwen apparently had some special method with the help of which he had remained unfazed by his suppressive power. So his fist immediately swept out. It produced a domain of immortals in the sky and smashed down. Heavenly music began to play, and golden lotuses sprouted on the ground. Countless immortals were reciting ancient scriptures. The world of immortals that everyone longed for smashed down. It was similar to the emergence god's fist. However, it wasn't clear how many times more tyrannical Lao Yi's strength was than that of Lu Jingyuan. After all, a great sage who had crossed the threshold was unimaginably formidable. Clang! Yi Shiwen attacked with his sword. It emitted endless rays of light, which covered half of the sky. It was a move of the buried heaven sword. It was his killer move. He had already seen how the opposite party was. He looked down upon the true martial world. In fact, he was thinking of using Yi Shiwen to humiliate the true martial world. After all, true martial world's people had already given him the title of the strongest person under the Great Sage Realm. Yi Shiwen was also self-confident in his regard. However, it was a typical case of overconfidence in their opinion. Their aim was to humiliate him, and then use this to humiliate the true martial world. Their vicious intentions were simply beyond description. The sword light blasted into the domain of immortals and destroyed everything. Everything that came in its contact got destroyed. This was the collision of the sword intention and fist intention in the sky. One person had condensed a huge country. He was using the supernatural power of countless immortals as the foundation of the fight. On the other hand, Yi Shiwen had used the belief inherent in his sword intention that it could destroy the world. Both of them collided in an instant. One person wanted to build a country of immortals, and the other wanted to destroy the world. Bang! Two formidable martial art concepts collided in the sky. It emitted incredible rays of light that proliferated in all directions in a spherical shape. The dreadful waves immediately destroyed the buildings and the surroundings. Many enchantments appeared in the surroundings when the spectators were about to retreat to save themselves. The fact was that the other great sages present in the Wind Dragon City had set into action. After all, they couldn't see the entire Wind Dragon City getting destroyed in the battle of these two individuals. They had to limit the scope of their battle to a certain degree. A huge mushroom cloud rose in the sky and proliferated in all directions. The dreadful astral wind swept out in circles, and even the barriers that had been put up by great sage experts started to collapse. Fu Astris K off! Yi Shiwen shouted. He was already burning with anger after they had provoked and attacked him again and again. Damned emergent school! Both men went into the space while fighting. They had a tacit understanding not to fight in the Wind Dragon City. Otherwise, the fight scope might grow even wider if they infuriated the other great sage experts present in the Wind Dragon City. Everyone followed after them but didn't dare to go close. Otherwise, even the astral winds produced during the battle would be enough to break these experts of under great sage realm like water pots. It's extremely terrifying. Is this the full strength attack of a great sage expert? Some people were extremely shocked. They were almost scared to death. Many people had never seen a great sage-level fight in their entire lives. Great sages were aloof personalities for them. Many people believed in their hearts that great sages had godlike existences. They had never seen great sage experts going all out in a fight. Therefore, they were left in awe when they saw Lao Yi attack. We might have already been reduced to pieces if we were in Yi Zaiwen's place. Lao Yi was merely in the initial stage of great sage realm. However, great sages who had already crossed the threshold mustn't be compared with their earlier selves. Yi Shiwen had also managed to contend against a great sage by depending upon the Star Colossus avatar. Otherwise, his real body could only manage to escape from the hands of a great sage. It was impossible for his real body to contend against a great sage. This Yi Shiwen is even more formidable. He hasn't entered the great sage realm yet. So, how can he contend against a great sage? Someone looked at Yi Shiwen in utter disbelief. Observant people could see that scarlet rays of light were flashing on Yi Zaiwen's body from time to time, which had increased his strength, and he had obtained the strength to contend against Lao Yi. However, the majority of people couldn't see it. They just felt as if they were witnessing a miracle. Especially, those disciples of the emergent school who were the first ones to chase after them followed them. Initially, they had thought that they would see their senior brother, Lao Yi, defeat Yi Shiwen in a crushing way. Yi Shiwen had effortlessly defeated Lu Jingyuan. This was like someone had ferociously thrown a slap on their faces. It was painful. They had been making fun of the experts of the true martial world back then. They looked down on them as if they were watching a group of ignorant aboriginals. However, the person whom they considered aboriginal had given them a tight slap on their faces. The slap on Lu Jingyuan's face was also a slap on their faces, since it had been ferociously aimed at their excessive pride. It had brought revolving stars before their eyes. However, they couldn't do anything. Lu Jingyuan was already one of the best experts among them. However, Yi Shiwen had destroyed his martial arts cultivation in one punch and made him a handicap. They knew one thing very clearly, that it was impossible for them to take revenge. They could only depend upon their senior brother, Lao Yi, to set into action and take revenge for them. They wanted to see Lao Yi crush Yi Shiwen. However, they saw that both men were equally matched as they charged into the space. They were almost scared to death by this revelation. Outsiders might not know, but how could they not know? Lao Yi has entered the great sage realm only recently. But many veteran experts of the initial stage of great sage realm still aren't a match for him. However, Yi Shiwen has turned out to be his equal. How can this be? No one could believe this. Yi Shiwen will become famous in the entire world just because of this fight. Nobody in the half-step great sage realm has ever contended against a great sage. This news will thoroughly affirm his reputation of the strongest person under the great sage realm if it transmits outside. They just didn't know that Yi Shiwen had already slaughtered a great sage a long time ago when he had been in the sage realm. Though, he had taken the help of the Star Colossus avatar for that. However, Yi Shiwen didn't find those great sages to be mysterious and aloof. The legendary great sages couldn't build a pressure upon him. He got almost the same feeling from them which he would get from ordinary sage experts. Both sides had already fought several hundred rounds inside the space within the blink of an eye. The body of a great sage was exceptionally perfect. Their fighting speed was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Those spectators were left in awe after they saw that Lao Yi couldn't get hold of Yi Shiwen for a long time. Even Lao Yi himself was exceptionally surprised. It was difficult for him to conceal the astonishment in his eyes. He had never thought that there would come a day when he wouldn't be able to catch an expert of half-step Great Sage Realm. He quite clearly knew the difference between half-step Great Sage Realm and Great Sage Realm. However, even an arrogant person like him wouldn't dare to say that he could contend against a great sage while being in the half-step Great Sage Realm. This had already surpassed his imagination. Damn it, die! Lao Yi looked at Yi Shiwen, who was unceasingly contending against him with extreme hatred. He had failed to quickly get hold of Yi Shiwen, and this was already a big slap on his face. Emergence rising immortal! Lao Yi shouted loudly, and unleashed the technique within the emergence god's fist. To be continued. Well, you 39 re a courageous dog, a cold shout came from that restaurant. Then a yellow figure dashed out from inside. Simultaneously, the mighty and boundless coercion of a great sage pressed down upon Yi Shiwen 39's body. It was so immensely heavy that it could suppress even a senior half-step great sage expert to death. It set off boundless astral wind that blew Yi Shiwen 39's clothes. A sound of fluttering of clothes echoed as a result. The astral wind scraped at his skin like a knife and issued a metal clanging. People didn't 39 know whether to call the astral wind dreadful or to say that Yi Shiwen 39's skin was incredibly hard. Yi Shiwen raised his head and saw that boundless suppressive power of the great sage expert didn't 39 cause a very big effect on him. This great sage power was enough to make the experts of below great sage realm lose their fighting prowess. It would seem like the organism at the bottom of the food chain had come across the one at the top of the food chain. They would only shiver, crouch, and welcome their death. However, that was true only for ordinary people. Yi Shiwen had already completed the transformation of his soul. So, there wasn't 39 any qualitative difference between him and a great sage. There was only quantitative difference between them. Therefore, this suppressive power which could crush the soul of a person had no effect on him. A yellow-robed youth appeared before Yi Shiwen 39's eyes. He had the vigor of a dragon and the ferocity of a tiger. His handsome face was filled with a cold expression at the moment. His eyes revealed a murderous intent. And this murderous intent was locked on Yi Shiwen. The boundless pressure crashed down. It was getting heavier and heavier. It seemed as if Yi Shiwen would get crushed under it. However, Yi Shiwen 39's complexion didn't 39 change despite this desperate situation. However, that yellow-robed youth senior brother, Lao, merely sneered again and said, well, the courageous dog is indeed quite crazy. He completely unleashed his imposing aura. The dreadful strength of the peak of the initial stage of Great Sage Realm was completely revealed. His aura was slightly unstable. So, he must have only recently entered the Great Sage Realm. However, he had entered the peak of the initial stage of Great Sage Realm relying upon his profound foundation. This meant that he would soon enter the intermediate stage of Great Sage Realm. Shokun was also so back then. However, this yellow-robed youth before his eyes was obviously much more formidable than Shokun. Shokun had been mainly dependent upon his accumulation of several hundred years. But this man before his eyes was incomparably tyrannical. He was even more formidable than Shokun. Who the hell do you think you are? Yi Shiwen coldly smiled. You 39, just a filthy pig. And you 39V dared to shame my true martial world. I would 39V trampled you to death. if I hadn't 39T seen Emergent School 39 as emblem, a group of youngsters on top of that restaurant looked at Yi Shiwen with ugly complexions. The complexion of that yellow-robed youth senior brother Lao also turned exceptionally ugly. He said, well, you 39 re, just an insignificant expert of the initial stage of half-step great sage realm, and you dare to insult a great sage. I am quite the rash person myself. You might be a reckless and arrogant guy, and you might even be the strongest person under great sage realm. However, I 39LL let you know the strength of a great sage today. That yellow-robed youth Lao, he stepped forward after saying this. Then his aura suddenly rose by countless times and became as heavy as a mountain. It then smashed down upon Yi Shiwen to crush him. However, he also knew that Yi Shiwen apparently had some special method with the help of which he had remained unfazed by his suppressive power. So, his fist immediately swept out. It produced a domain of immortals in the sky and smashed down. Heavenly music began to play, and golden lotuses sprouted on the ground. Countless immortals were reciting ancient scriptures. The world of immortals that everyone longed for smashed down. It was similar to the Emergence God 39's fist. However, it wasn't 39T clear how many times more tyrannical Lao E39's strength was than that of Lu Jingyuan. After all, a great sage who had crossed the threshold was unimaginably formidable. Clang Yi Shiwen attacked with his sword. It emitted endless rays of light which covered half of the sky. It was a move of the buried heaven sword. It was his killer move. He had already seen how the opposite party was. He looked down upon the true martial world. In fact, he was thinking of using Yi Shiwen to humiliate the true martial world. After all, true martial world 39's people had already given him the title of the strongest person under the great sage realm. Yi Shiwen was also self-confident in his regard. However, it was a typical case of overconfidence in their opinion. Their aim was to humiliate him, and then use this to humiliate the true martial world. Their vicious intentions were simply beyond description. The sword light blasted into the domain of immortals and destroyed everything. Everything that came in its contact got destroyed. This was the collision of the sword intention and fist intention in the sky. One person had condensed a huge country. He was using the supernatural power of countless immortals as the foundation of the fight. On the other hand, Yi Shiwen had used the belief inherent in his sword intention that it could destroy the world. Both of them collided in an instant. One person wanted to build a country of immortals, and the other wanted to destroy the world. Bang, two formidable martial art concepts collided in the sky. It emitted incredible rays of light that proliferated in all directions in a spherical shape. The dreadful waves immediately destroyed the buildings and the surroundings. Many enchantments appeared in the surroundings when the spectators were about to retreat to save themselves. The fact was that the other great sages present in the Wind Dragon City had set into action. After all, they couldn't 39T see the entire Wind Dragon City getting destroyed in the battle of these two individuals. They had to limit the scope of their battle to a certain degree. A huge mushroom cloud rose in the sky and proliferated in all directions. The dreadful astral went swept out in circles, and even the barriers that had been put up by great sage experts started to collapse. Fu Kei off Yi Shiwen shouted. He was already burning with anger after they had provoked and attacked him again and again. Damned Emergent School, both men went into the space while fighting. They had a tacit understanding not to fight in the Wind Dragon City. Otherwise, the Fight 39's scope might grow even wider if they infuriated the other great sage experts present in the Wind Dragon City. Everyone followed after them, but didn't 39T dare to go close. Otherwise, even the astral winds produced during the battle would be enough to break these experts of under great sage realm like water pots. It 39's extremely terrifying. Is this the full strength attack of a great sage expert? Some people were extremely shocked. They were almost scared to death. Many people had never seen a great sage level fight in their entire lives. Great sages were aloof personalities for them. Many people believed in their hearts that great sages had god-like existences. They had never seen great sage experts going all out in a fight. Therefore, they were left in awe when they saw Lao Yi attack. We might 39V already been reduced to pieces if we were in Yi Shiwen 39's place. Lao Yi was merely in the initial stage of Great Sage realm. However, great sages who had already crossed the threshold mustn't 39T be compared with their earlier selves. Yi Shiwen had also managed to contend against a great sage by depending upon the Star Colossus 39's avatar. Otherwise, his real body could only manage to escape from the hands of a great sage. It was impossible for his real body to contend against a great sage. This Yi Shiwen is even more formidable. He hasn't 39T entered the great sage realm yet. So, how can he contend against a great sage? Someone looked at Yi Shiwen in utter disbelief. Observant people could see that scarlet rays of light were flashing on Yi Shiwen 39's body from time to time, which had increased his strength, and he had obtained the strength to contend against Lao Yi. However, the majority of people couldn't 39T see it. They just felt as if they were witnessing a miracle. Especially those disciples of the emergent school who were the first ones to chase after them followed them. Initially, they had thought that they would see their senior brother Lao Yi defeat Yi Shiwen in a crushing way. Yi Shiwen had effortlessly defeated Lu Jingyuan. This was like someone had ferociously thrown a slap on their faces. It was painful. They had been making fun of the experts of the true martial world back then. They looked down on them as if they were watching a group of ignorant aboriginals. However, the person whom they considered aboriginal had given them a tight slap on their faces. The slap on Lu Jingyuan 39's face was also a slap on their faces, since it had been ferociously aimed at their excessive pride. It had brought revolving stars before their eyes. However, they couldn't 39T do anything. Lu Jingyuan was already one of the best experts among them. However, Yi Shiwen had destroyed his martial arts cultivation in one punch and made him a handicap. They knew one thing very clearly, that it was impossible for them to take revenge. They could only depend upon their senior brother Lao Yi to set into action and take revenge for them. They wanted to see Lao Yi crush Yi Shiwen. However, they saw that both men were equally matched as they charged into the space. They were almost scared to death by this revelation. Outsiders might not know, but how could they not know Lao Yi has entered the Great Sage realm only recently? But many veteran experts of the initial stage of Great Sage realm still aren't 39T a match for him. However, Yi Shiwen has turned out to be his equal. How can this be? No one could believe this. Yi Shiwen will become famous in the entire world just because of this fight. Nobody in the half-step Great Sage realm has ever contended against a Great Sage. This news will thoroughly affirm his reputation of the strongest person under the Great Sage realm if it transmits outside. They just didn't 39T know that Yi Shiwen had already slaughtered a great sage a long time ago when he had been in the Sage realm. Though, he had taken the help of the Star Colossus 39's avatar for that. However, Yi Shiwen didn't 39T find those great sages to be mysterious and aloof. The legendary great sages couldn't 39T build a pressure upon him. He got almost the same feeling from them which he would get from ordinary sage experts. Both sides had already fought several hundred rounds inside the space. Within the blink of an eye, the body of a great sage was exceptionally perfect. Their fighting speed was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Those spectators were left in awe after they saw that Lao Yi couldn't 39T get hold of Yi Shiwen for a long time. Even Lao Yi himself was exceptionally surprised. It was difficult for him to conceal the astonishment in his eyes. He had never thought that there would come a day when he wouldn't 39T be able to catch an expert of half-step Great Sage realm. He quite clearly knew the difference between half-step Great Sage realm and Great Sage realm. However, even an arrogant person like him wouldn't 39T dare to say that he could contend against a great sage while being in the half-step Great Sage realm. This had already surpassed his imagination. Damn it, Dai Lao, he looked at Yi Shiwen, who was unceasingly contending against him with extreme hatred. He had failed to quickly get hold of Yi Shiwen, and this was already a big slap on his face. Emergence rising, immortal Lao, he shouted loudly. and unleashed the technique within the Emergence God 39's fist. To be continued. Chapter 651, Emergence, Rising Immortal. Lao, he shouted with a blast, conjuring up infinite fairy light. The infinite fairy light tore into the sky, as if it leads into another world. There were many voices chanting. The countless fairy lights condensed onto a domain of immortals. It was bombarding from the other side of the crack, vast and mighty, almost as if it was going to shock someone to death. Clang! The light of the sword in Yi Zaiwen's hands expanded into the wind, growing into the size of about 10 feet. When he slashed down light lightning, there were no martial arts or techniques. It was just the simplest slash. Yet, such a simple slash changed the color of the entire sky. The space was completely split open and slashed towards Lao Yi. Boom! Yi Zaiwen's sword was extremely fast, and there was a sound of rushing thunder in it. The sword cut through the kingdom of saints, and the country of immortals crumbled in an instant. These two realms were switched almost effortlessly in Yi Zaiwen's hands. This alternating power instantly crumbled the unstoppable country of immortals. Damn it! That is the eternal, imperishable country of immortals. Yi Shiwen sliced open his kingdom of saints with one slash. Lao, he was furious. He shouted in a rage, "The sage's gentle touch." Another punch blasted out, and a great sage materialized, with white hair and beard, a white robe, over 1,000 feet tall, like a true immortal. It punched towards Yi Shiwen. This was the condensed supreme fist. In Lao Yi's ideology, this was the true great sage. It was the goal that the emergent school teachings have been searching for billions of years. This punch surpassed the origins of the universe. A huge crack broke into the entire space with one punch. With the swiftness of a sudden clap of thunder, the punch swept towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen immediately lifted his sword that extended its light into the sky and protected himself. After all, he hasn't crossed over to become a great sage. He couldn't underestimate the attack power of a great sage. If he had crossed over to become a great sage, he wouldn't even take this kind of attack into consideration. It was impossible to pose any threat to him. Boom! The black crack collided with the sword light that reached the sky. A noise that shook the skies rang out as a huge mushroom formed at the location of the collision, rising. The boundless force was like waves, sweeping out in circles. It was like a star that suddenly exploded. It illuminated in general. It was an even shade of autumn. The black crack didn't advance even an inch. Then, another shout followed, binding hair of longevity. Another supreme fist technique was blasted out by the healthy and hearty old man. Yet another punch broke the earth and the skies. A punch bombarded downwards, blasting out the essence of longevity. Lao, he was angry. He was really enraged. He stacked on another punch recklessly. It was just like the waves. Before the previous one settled down, the next one rose again. This technique of the binding hair of longevity was consecutive to the sage's gentle touch. Coincidentally, as these two techniques were stacked together, the power of the two techniques were magnified greatly. It was terrifying to the core. Yi Shiwen just blocked the attack. Suddenly, an even more terrifying force swept over. It was much stronger than before. It was a huge fist that seemed to appear from the sky. It broke Yi Zaiwen's protective sword light. The countless sword lights perished at that fist. However, there was no stopping it, but instead it was strangled by the first into fragments. Boom! The fist burst 3 inches in front of Yi Shiwen, but was blocked by a scarlet barrier. The boundless boxing blasted on the enchantment, and the boundless power spread out in circles. It was Tianyuan mirror that launched immediately and automatically protected its master. A huge pit suddenly appeared inside the barrier, and cracks like spider webs cracked in all directions. Yi Zaiwen's body was sent flying and continuously flipped over dozens of times due to the giant force. Then he stepped on a broken meteorite to stop himself. Is that all you've got? If that's all you can do, then you should die. Lao Yi's gaze was tyrannical, and he was extremely delighted. He completely released the highest strength in the early days of the Great Holy Realm. He hadn't been able to have such an enlightening match after crossing over to become Great Sage. The other opponents were either too weak or too strong. He couldn't fight a satisfying match at all. Although this fist did not hammer Yi Shiwen to death, but it was much stronger than before. Looking at Yi Shiwen, who was blasted and sent flying, his heart was extremely delighted. Someone who didn't cross over to become Great Sage was indeed not up to par. It was a world of great difference to be compared to someone who truly crossed over to become Great Sage, such as himself. Thinking of this, his depressed feeling due to him being unable to take down Yi Shiwen for a long time dissipated. Lao Yi stepped forward and shortened the world, as if the land had shrunk into an inch. The fist that punched Yi Shiwen reappeared, punching towards Yi Shiwen. Boom! 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 With a loud booming sound, each of Lu Yi's punches turned into a country of immortals and fell on Yi Shiwen's body. The barrier around his body crumbled under the shower of attacks like raindrops. It was cracking all over like a turtle shell, as if it would break the very next second. Yet it didn't break and shouldered the attack bit by bit. Under Lao Yi's attack, Yi Shiwen also seemed to be losing ground and retreating. Seeing that Lao Yi had completely gained the upper hand, many of the emergent school disciples were relieved, with a proud expression on their faces, as if they were the ones who defeated Yi Shiwen now. Haha, as I've said, the strongest person under this great saint is nothing but rubbish. He is simply a clown that doesn't know his own strength. There is no failure if senior brother Lao take his shot. This man even dared to challenge our emergent school disciples. He was really looking for death. The disciples of the emergent school all uttered insults, as if to vent their sullen mood. They were even worried just now that senior brother Lao would be defeated at the hands of Yi Shiwen, who was only halfway crossed over to become Great Sage. They all feel a sense of shame thinking about it now. Senior brother Lao was such a genius person. How would he be defeated at the hands of this jumping clown? It was simply impossible. They completely forgot the horrible shock that Yi Shiwen's powerful performance just gave them, and how at that moment they almost felt that brother Lao was about to be defeated. Looking at it now, senior brother Lao's emergence god boxing has been practiced to the point where he is incomprehensible. One punch broke the world. One punch destroyed the world, and the two forces of birth and death were reflected in his fists. Although they are all emergence god fists, the intention of the fist cultivated by each person was different. Not everyone was the same. They were the best among the core disciples, and they have the opportunity to be taught the emergence god fist. They were considered rare amongst the thousands and millions of disciples that Yu Hua had taught. However, their practice of the emergence god fist could not be compared to Lao Yi, who has already crossed over to become a great saint. His emergence god fist made rapid progress in the early stages when he crossed over to become a great sage. Just by looking at the emergence god fist that Lao Yi blasted out, let them have great understanding that it was almost at the peak of the skill. It was a great help to their practice of the emergence god fist just by spectating. Many warriors of the true martial world had different views. They looked at the egoistical disciples of the emergent school with disdain. Crushing someone that was halfway to become a great sage just because they failed to meet a great sage was already a great problem. Only they didn't feel that way and still felt proud of themselves, thinking that they were incredible. Of course, they don't look down on EE, a great sage, nor are they qualified to despise them. Although Lao Yi has never taken down Yi Shiwen, everyone knows that it was not that Lao Yi was not strong enough, but that Yi Shiwen is too scary. If it was them instead, they would not be able to withstand the raindrop-like shower of fists. This Yi Shiwen is really outrageously strong. Did he really not cross over to become a great sage? He can counter the great sage even as a halfway great sage. This battle really needs to be remembered in history. He really hasn't crossed over to become a great sage. He doesn't have the coercion abilities of a great sage that carry dread straight into the soul. But what's the difference if he crossed over to become a great sage? Even if he has the help of other things, it is enough for his name to be known everywhere. It is a miracle for a halfway great sage to be a match with a full-fledged great sage. But this battle should also end. Although it is unknown what methods Yi Shiwen used to contend to this, but it cannot go on. The stronger Lao Yi techniques are to surpass the skies. Yi Shiwen can only continue defending himself. There is only waiting for someone to let their guard down, and no such thing as keeping your guard up all the time. The more he defends, he is bound to lose. There is no way he can continue holding it up. Although many people were shocked by Yi Shiwen's performance, before that, they simply couldn't imagine that there was a halfway great sage who could compete with a full-fledged great sage. However, no one was optimistic towards Yi Shiwen. After all, it was one thing to contend against a great sage, and by merely contending, there was no way of defeating Lao Yi. The sacred barrier was no match for a true great sage. It was already astounding to be able to contend temporarily, but it was simply impossible to compete in the long run. It was like people fighting against ants, ridiculous. But they were stunned, because under their observation, Yi Shiwen did not lose quickly. Instead, he continued to persist. 1,000 moves, 2,000 moves, 3,000 moves. After some time, even Lao Yi felt that something was wrong. His emergence God Fist was casted for an uncountable amount of times. His originally strong momentum was also slowly weakening down, yet Yi Shiwen on the other side didn't have the slightest change. Suddenly, a monstrous aura emanated from Yi Shiwen. It's my turn now. Chapter 652. Lao Yi's punches blasted out one by one, and in the blink of an eye, it was over 1,000 moves. Yet, he still couldn't defeat Yi Shiwen, and he began to realize something was amiss. He was not a fool, he was fighting too smoothly. It was only because Yi Shiwen let him fight as if there was no resistance at all. But he had faced many battles after all, so he recovered very quickly. Once he recovered and sobered up, that last little bit of pride and arrogance disappeared without a trace. His emergence God Fist already landed many times. Yi Zaiwen's protection seemed like it could handle no more, yet it still shook and remained until now. Damn! Lao Yi muttered in a low voice. The immortal blasted his way instantly, and his whole Bodis aura was instantly adjusted to the highest point. He struck with all his might, wanting to break down Yi Zaiwen's barrier completely. Boom! The place where Yi Shiwen stood was completely broken. Huh! Lao Yi laughed immediately, but it seemed that he was choking on something when he laughed halfway. Yi Shiwen, who was supposed to die, still stood there firmly. He was stepping above the chaos, with layers of golden waves undulating beneath him. The chaos that could obliterate someone couldn't even approach him. Boom! Yi Shiwen had a monstrous aura sweeping emanating from his body. The weather changed in an instant, and even the stars shook. It's my turn now, Yi Shiwen yelled loudly, his eyes full of the spirit of battle. His aura was even more overbearing than before. This was his first time really fighting with a great sage, as the previous encounters didn't count. He borrowed the avatar of the Star Beast, so he already had an invincible and tyrannical body. It could only be broken by force. Whatever martial arts and techniques were useless to his physical body, so he didn't care for it. He just needed to be rolled over repeatedly. But now it wasn't possible. He had to borrow the power of his deity, even though his physical body was already very resilient. However, it couldn't be compared with the Star Beast and had to cooperate with the Tianyuan Mirror. He was in the process of constantly adapting to the power of Tianyuan Mirror in that period of time. It might seem like he was being beaten passively, but in reality, he was constantly improving. All the spectators were shocked. Could it be that Yi Shiwen still had hidden abilities that he hasn't shown? It was like a roller coaster. Suddenly it was heaven, and suddenly it became hell. He was a half-great sage battling against a full-fledged great sage, and he actually concealed a part of his real strength. It was really questionable if he was really strong enough or if he was looking for death. None of them knew it. Yi Shiwen never kept anything hidden, yet he was preserving his real strength when facing a great sage. Isn't that looking for death? It should be noted that one must use their full strength even when dealing with a minor problem. Moreover, this was winning from a weak position. Before this, his coordination with the Tianyuan mirror was not so seamless. Yi Shiwen needed some time to familiarize himself with the Tianyuan mirror that upgraded to become a great sage tier weapon. It was most suitable to familiarize himself with it during battle. As the mutual understanding between them increased, Yi Shiwen was also able to be in touch with the Tianyuan mirror's power after upgrading to become sacred weapon. Thus, his abilities seemed to rise continuously. Yi Shiwen cried out. He stomped abruptly, setting off golden waves as an incomparable aura radiated from his body. The void of the universe shook as he stepped forward. A bloody aura swept through the entire universe. He appeared in front of Lao Yi in a flash, a long sword appearing in his hands. The sword light that reached the sky struck down like lightning. Clang! Yi Shiwen slashed the long sword, and Lao Yi quickly raised his hand to stop it. A surge on mysterious aura emanated from his arms, forming into a barrier in front of him. As the long sword clashed on the barrier, sparks flew everywhere. The sparks were burning through space, and the sound was like the clashing between metal and gold. Yi Shiwen, you can't do anything to me. Lao Yi laughed loudly. He didn't realize when even something such as Yi Shiwen unable to do anything to him became something to be proud of. Can't do anything. SCR*WU. Yi Zaiwen's long sword slashed down again, as if it was a machete. It was a simple slash with no techniques, yet it brought unimaginably terrifying power with it. The whole space was instantly torn. Clang! The sound of metal and gold clashing sounded again. Sparks were flying everywhere. Lao Yi felt a brute force rushing down and was nearly sent flying. He felt very depressed. Even though he was able to stop the sharp edge of the long sword, he couldn't block out the strange force. It was literally a humanoid dragon, a monster in human skin. Without waiting for him to think about it, Yi Shiwen swept down a second technique. He was using the long sword like a knife. Earlier on, it would have been handy for him to use the acquired knife technique Cold Moon Slash. Back then, he was in the acquire realm, but now a simple technique that he just made out could possibly be beyond the Holy Realm. The strength of Cold Moon Slash was 10,000 times stronger in his hands. The characteristic of being more powerful than a sword was showing incisively in his hands. Clang! The power of this slash was more terrifying than the one just now. Lao Yi felt as if his hands were going to be crippled. His barrier showed that it was cracking everywhere, and he instantly felt extremely depressed. This barrier was casted from his inner armor. It was an incomplete sacred weapon. When he received this armor several hundred years ago, he took care of it like a baby. It was also because of this armor that he had never sustained any injury when he was battling with people of the same rank as himself. It was always him crushing others, but now it was his turn to be crushed. There were cracks surfacing on the barrier. To him, it was simply unthinkable. If only he knew that Yi Shiwen had a sacred weapon on him, maybe he would understand. SR*WU. Yi Shiwen was still enraged in his heart. These people from Emergent School were simply too bullying and arrogant. Clang! Another sound of the clashing of metal and gold stuck out. Lao Yi's arms were collapsing. SR*WU. Clang! SR*WU. Clang! As Yi Shiwen wielded the long sword, the Cold Moon Slash of power that even the original creator could have hardly imagined. Or at least the original creator probably didn't expect that one day this set of blades could completely crush a full-fledged great sage until they couldn't fight back. Bang! Yi Shiwen drew another sword. The sword light swayed and hurt the eyes of those that saw it. It broke Lao Yi's defenses for a moment. It was already an incomplete sacred weapon. How could it stand against a complete sacred weapon and Yi Zaiwen's crazed slashing? An incomplete sacred weapon compared to a complete one was nowhere near the same notion at all. A sacred weapon is difficult to be damaged, but once damaged, its power would be greatly reduced. The sword light slashed on Lao Yi and cut a long crack which was blocked by his internal armor. But Lao Yi was sent flying and crashed into a meteorite. He looked at Yi Shiwen with horror in his eyes. unable to believe that this was the outcome. How could he be defeated and crushed by a half-great sage? It was almost like listening to a myth. At this time, all the spectating warriors, especially the emergent school disciples, were frightened. What did they see? Just what in the world did they observe? A great sage was crushed by a half-great sage. If it was a miracle that a half-great sage could compete with a full-fledged great sage, then what is it now? A myth? This is impossible. Senior brother Lao is invincible. How could he be crushed by this half-great sage? No one wanted to believe this, especially the disciples of emergent school. This was someone from the true martial world that they despised. The so-called strongest under the great sage was a joke to them. But seeing as it is, not only was he the strongest under the great sage, the weaker ones are not his opponents at all. However, the true martial world warriors all took in a deep breath. Seeing this, they were no less astonished compared to the emergent school disciples, especially after seeing Yi Shiwen slaughtering the warriors in the demon realm before. It was a boundless frustration. If it was a miracle before that Yi Shiwen slaughtered hundreds of half-great sages, then it is really a myth now. A half-great sage actually crushed a great sage. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they wouldn't believe it. It wasn't that Lao Yi was too weak, but Yi Shiwen was too strong. If Lao Yi was a genius and arrogant, then Yi Shiwen is a demon dressed in human skin. Yes, that's what they think now. Aside from this, they have no reason to describe it. Yi Shiwen ignored the surprise of the crowd. Taking another step, he lounged towards Lao Yi. Yi Shiwen died. Lao Yi saw that Yi Shiwen lounged towards him, and suddenly looked a little crazy. There was an inexplicable power in the void was permeating, boiling, and countless mysterious powers swept through and fell. The space was torn apart silently. A huge portal descended from the sky. A huge white jade portal entangled with mystery. An unimaginable atmosphere. Mysterious, simple, noble, and suppressed in an instant. Oh my God! Is this the gateway of the Holy Realm? This is the peak of the Emergence God Fist. Senior brother actually practiced until he could summon the gateway of the Holy Realm. If he could borrow the power from the entire Holy Realm to collapse the void, then that Yi Shiwen is dead. Yes, the gateway of the Holy Realm is a gateway to communicate with the Holy Realm. It has the essence of the Holy Realm. Legend has it that once you cross through the gateway of the Holy Realm, you can be baptized by the power of the Holy Realm and become a sage. It's impossible for him to fight against the gateway of the Holy Realm, because it is to fight with the whole world. The disciples of Emergent School recognized this enormous portal and were shocked. Yi Zaiwen's expression was dignified. He felt a terrible power from this portal. Chapter 653. It was a terrible, unmatched power. It was contained and boiling. It was almost as if the power was borrowed from an unknown source. Could it be that it was the Holy Realm? Yi Shiwen didn't. He expect that the Emergence God Fist to have this effect in the end. It really deserved to be known as Emergent School's secret weapon that could dominate the world. Most people would be at a dead end if they encountered this situation. Behind that portal, it was as if there was really a holy realm. An inexplicable energy leaked out of it, and a majestic chanting came from it. It seemed that the sage in the holy realm was yelling out to Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen, you're bold. Quickly bow down. Do you intend to offend the skies? Yi Shiwen, your sins are enough for you to go to the 18th layer of hell. Realize the truth. The desire for war in Yi Zaiwen's eyes intensified. What sage? They just wanted him to confess his sins. What a big joke. So what if the gods from the heavens were to descend? His fate is up to himself and not the gods. If a god were to stop him, he would slay the god. If Buddha stops him, he would slay Buddha. If the skies were to stop him, he would break the skies. The aura emanating from Yi Zaiwen's body was growing thicker. The aura of blood became more terrifying. His blood began to boil deep down as the Tianyuan mirror's power started. A terrible demon appeared behind him in the flesh. It had a ferocious and monstrous aura. It was the incarnation of Yemo. The portal was nearing, and it suppressed, and from it flew out many sages, each of them holding up a gesture to cast their spells, shouting towards Yi Shiwen, while their overwhelming power swept the earth. Roar! Yemo roared. He was the instrumental spirit of Tianyuan Mirror. After Tianyuan Mirror was promoted to become a great saint weapon, his strength also increased exponentially. Yemo stretched out one claw, and it turned into a magical hand that covered the sky and grabbed towards the sages that rushed over. Bang! 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 The sages screamed as they were caught into a cluster of spiritual energy. They were not real sages, but instead were formed from spiritual energy. However, it was still extremely rare to be able to refine the emergence god fist skill to this point. There were still countless sages being constantly formed at the gateway of the Holy Realm. The sages emerged one after another in vast and mighty numbers. They formed into a large army of sages that rushed towards Yi Shiwen with killing intent. Although Yemo caught the sages one by one, but the sages were falling down on at a terrifyingly fast speed like a ferocious tiger. It was as if they do not intend to stop until they managed to kill Yi Shiwen. Boom! The demonic hand that covered the sky grabbed towards the gateway of the Holy Realm. The two unparalleled forces clashed against each other, and a boundless force swept up, causing the whole space to shake violently. The demonic hand that covered the sky only blocked the gateway to the Holy Realm for a while, only making it tremble a little. However, the sages continued descending from the gateway to the Holy Realm. It's futile. This is a gateway that opens to the Holy Realm and summons sages. Nobody can destroy the gateway to the Holy Realm. What do you mortals know? Lao Yi shouted, his face full of pleasure, as if he could see Yi Shiwen being killed the next second. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly. In an instant, countless thoughts turned in his mind, and countless elixir began to burn. But at this critical moment, the mysterious space was used to deduce the truth of this gateway to the Holy Realm. Yi Mo and Yi Shiwen have the same mind, and immediately knew what he was going to do. They unleashed many peak demon realm techniques, many of which have been lost for a long time. Only an old man like him, with unknown age and origins, could unleash it. All kinds of lost techniques blocked the gateway to the Holy Realm, although it was only for a moment, but it was enough for Yi Shiwen. In the short moment of a few seconds, Yi Shiwen burned at least several hundred thousands of elixirs and used the mysterious space to deduce some things. The gateway to the Holy Realm may be the will of Lao Yi to communicate with another world, and it was formed with an endless energy. To make a balance with the gateway to the Holy Realm is to have an equal will in this world. Although it's just a small ray of will in that world, but to a mortal, it was an unmatched force. It would be very difficult to defeat this gateway to the Holy Realm. Yi Shiwen had an idea right away. Since the gateway to the Holy Realm was difficult to break, then it would be easier to break Lao Yi. As long as Lao Yi is killed, the gateway to the Holy Realm would soon disappear, and by that time, any crisis will be resolved. Yi Shiwen didn't hesitate, and immediately stepped out and rushed towards Lao Yi. Then when Lao Yi saw Yi Shiwen rushing over, and immediately understood that Yi Shiwen had seen through the weakness of this trick. The weakness of this technique lies in himself. If it was a powerful warrior that summoned it, then it was indeed invincible. His power was not weak, as he was at the peak in the early days of crossing over to Great Sage. In this infinite sky, he was one of the strongest. Is that weak? Of course not. But Yi Shiwen was even more powerful. He could actually suppress him, a real Great Sage, as a half-step Great Sage. So his weakness, which was not exactly a weakness, turned into his fatal wound. Since he's seen through Yi Ziwen's intention, naturally he couldn't let Yi Shiwen succeed. He quickly unfolded his body and stepped away suddenly. Pa! Yi Shiwen squeezed his fingers into a fist and leaped towards Lao Yi in an instant. His body unfolded like a hunting falcon. The punch blasted out and turned into a big star, falling down suddenly. Die! Yi Shiwen sneered. His speed was extremely fast. The demon's wings haven't spread open. But in such a short distance, the time gap was not much different whether or not the wings were spread open. He chased towards Lao Yi. Lao Yi couldn't get rid of the hunt chase at all. Impossible, you will be killed by me first. No one could break the gateway to the Holy Realm. You only have a dead end. Lao Yi kept running away, saying so rather hysterically. Where does all these nonsense come from you? Yi Shiwen snorted with a humph and chased towards Lao Yi. His punch blasted onto Lao Yi, and a violent power poured into Lao Yi's body instantly. Boom! An unimaginable force boiled in Lao Yi's body, and a loud explosion blasted out from his body. His blood sprayed everywhere, broken bones flying out. Lao Yi seemed to be constantly exploding. He kept struggling, and even he could see that his great sage technique was about to be blasted out, screaming. On the other side, Yi Mo was continuously roaring. The huge portal was constantly suppressed. He was like a giant against the sky. He was carrying that portal, which was not an ordinary portal, but the legendary Holy Realm. He, a great demon, suppressed the portal. The skin on his whole body was boiling as he touched the gateway, burning violently. It was terrifying. He was catching his opponents constantly, grabbing towards the flying sages. The Tianyuan mirror also burst out an unimaginable light, resisting against the Holy Realm. This was a pride to the demons. It was the utmost price for a weapon that was once carried by a demon. Lao Yi screamed endlessly. At this time, he finally regretted it. He never dreamed that Yi Shiwen was so monstrous. As a half-step great sage, he crushed a great sage. It was like a miracle. He began to regret that he should not have been troubled by those junior brothers and sisters to find trouble for Yi Shiwen, or that he was so proud that he never put Yi Shiwen in his eyes. In his eyes, those that have not crossed over to be a great sage were all ants. So what if this person was called the person under the great sage? Never mind that he was only selected by the real martial world, even if it is the first person under the real great sage. It must be suffocating enough to meet someone that was in the early stages of becoming a great sage. Moreover, it was like him, a skilled person that was unparalleled in existence in the early stages of being a great sage. Originally, in his mind, it would have been a shame if Yi Shiwen had escaped. He even thought about killing Yi Shiwen with a few techniques. He just didn't expect that Yi Shiwen was so terrifying. It was such a joke thinking about it now. Oh my God, did I see a myth? Yi Shiwen is really going against the heavens, and he can actually fight against a great sage as a half-step great sage. Many people couldn't believe it when they saw this scene. Of course, they believed that Yi Shiwen was not an ordinary half-step great sage. There must be something different about him, but even so, in their hearts, Yi Shiwen is almost like a god. Being able to fight against a master in the early days of becoming a great sage, from now on, I am afraid that it is not only the strongest under the great sage. The two of them are now fighting, and they're fighting with patience. If Lao Yi is slain by Yi Shiwen as first, then the gateway of the Holy Realm will disappear. But conversely, if Yi Shiwen is dead, then everything will be gone. Many people with good eyesight could see that both sides were snatching time, to see who could grab enough time first. Whoever who grabs enough time would kill the other, and the victory would be determined. Lao Yi's screams traveled through the universe. Faster, faster. We have to take action against Yi Shiwen. We can't let him kill senior brother Lao. We just need some time. Then we can slaughter him. We can kill him. The disciples of the Emergent School said suddenly. The other disciples of Emergent School suddenly realized that they couldn't let Yi Shiwen carry on. Otherwise, Lao Yi would really die. They didn't hesitate. They rushed in front of Yi Shiwen as fast as lightning, and an Emergence God Fist appeared. It was in mid-air as they banded together to form a domain of immortals. It covered the land and sky and fell towards Yi Shiwen. It is as futile as a mantis trying to stop a car. Yi Shiwen sneered coldly. The pores of his body opened. An endless sword aura emanated. A huge sword materialized midair and struck down like lightning. Boom! For Yi Shiwen, who now has full control of Tianyuan Mirror, These half-step great sages are unlikely to pose any threat to him. The domain of immortals disintegrated midair, and the disciples of the emergent school suddenly screamed while clusters of blood mist sprayed out. The Tianyuan mirror absorbed all the blood and wealth. Bang! Lao, he couldn't hold on first, and his physical body disintegrated immediately. Chapter 654. Boom! Lao Yi's body burst into the air like a burst of firecrackers. Blood splattered out, bone splinters flying, his body disintegrating into the air. His spirit screamed in agony as Yi Shiwen captured it. Whatever secrets he had flooded Yi Xiwen's mind in an instant. After that, Yi Shiwen could infer all of it into a mysterious space. Whatever secrets there was meant nothing to him. As long as he had enough elixirs, he could extract all of them. Yi Shiwen calculated for bit. He consumed at least 100 million elixirs during this battle, but the wealth that he obtained from others exceeded 150 million elixirs. Generally speaking, he didn't lose anything and instead gained some. This gave him a little balance in his heart. Otherwise, he would be so depressed. He was involved in a fight that he didn't want at all, but the other party involved him regardless of whether or not he was willing to be involved in this fight. People domineering and looking at him with disdain made him unsatisfied. Before this, the disciples of the emergent school were also good people, but if they hadn't instigated the fight, he wouldn't have been inexplicably involved in the fight. Perhaps now, the people of emergent school would hate him to death. Before this, the distinguished prince was nothing. After all, he was just another half-step great sage. He was nothing at all. But now it was a group of elite-tier half-step great sages that died. Just think about the status of a monstrous kraken in a monster village, and one would understand the status of these people within the disciples of emergent school. This is not the most important thing. The key is that they have also injured a great saint, an actual great saint. Moreover, he wasn't just any ordinary great sage. He was someone with unlimited power, looked up by many. Maybe he even had a chance to surpass great sage in the future. But now he was injured. When emergent school knows of this, they would be furious. No matter which great force, the holy realm was considered to be the top beam of the pillar. It could be on its own, known as the dominating king. Injuring one of them would shake every single person in higher power. Not to mention that emergent school was one of the dominating forces in the world. But for Yi Shiwen, it was nothing. He didn't care for it at all. Slaying one distinguished prince was still killing. So what if he killed a few more? Even if one of them were to be a great sage. He didn't even care about it at all. On the contrary, his attention was off-cued on being able to cooperate with the Tianyuan mirror. After cooperating with Tianyuan mirror, Yi Shiwen can really be considered to have the strength to compete with the great sage, not just in theory. The great sage was too strong. Not to mention that without the cooperation of a great sage weapon like the Tianyuan mirror, he was someone at the highest point who could simply kill half-step great sages like a monstrous kraken. But now, tyrannical people like Lu Jingyuan could be killed by him with a simple smack of his hand. However, the gap between a half-step great sage and a full-fledged great sage was still huge. But the gap between the great saint and the great saint is still very large. It was definitely an instant success. The only difference was the gap between the earth and the sky. He bridged the gap with his own domineering power and cooperation with the Tianyuan mirror. No one else could possibly duel. After all, most great sages don't have great sage weapons. How could a mere half-step great sage have such an item? One would be considered to be in the wealthy category to have an incomplete great sage weapon. Secondly, they couldn't compare to Yi Xiwen's own powerful strength. Not to mention that Yi Shiwen and the great sage weapon have a seamless cooperation. Therefore, only Yi Shiwen could achieve such a miracle. There was no way to replicate it. Yi Shiwen stepped on a golden divinity. It seemed as if he was a gold-casted god of war. With the borrowed power of the late-stage great sage that just slain countless half-step great sages. The people from the Holy Realm that were watching and the half-step great sage warriors all held their breaths. It was as if even breathing would anger the moody and cruel demon lord in front of them. The people that Yi Shiwen glanced over bowed their heads, not daring to look directly into his eyes. It indicated their obedience. Yi Shiwen calmed down his thoughts and didn't think about the issue with Emergent School. He killed them all anyway, it was not a big deal. Those disciples of the Emergent School dared to try and murder him on the street, looking down on people of the true martial world. They should have been prepared to be killed. Moreover, wouldn't he, as a disciple of the real martial school, have the guts to do so? He turned and stepped out, turning into a ray of light. He went towards the Wind Dragon Star below the Wind Dragon City. After Yi Shiwen left, the warriors who were suppressed by his terrible aura were relieved. That gaze was too terrifying. It was like a sharp knife, illuminating thousands of miles. Although it wasn't directly targeted towards them, but they were shocked and terrified of Yi Shiwen, who just killed a great sage. That gaze is too terrifying. It makes one feel like they are falling into an ice cave. He killed them. He really killed the disciples of the Emergent School. Oh my God. These were disciples that were sent here by Emergent School. Now all of them are gone. Emergent School will be furious. They might even send an army to take on a punitive expedition. They're already dead. Do you think that the people from the Emergent School would be at ease? These past few years, many forces in the depths of the sky have appeared in the grounds of the real martial world. It is said that they are looking for something shocking. I predict that by then, there would be a big war. Do you think we won't be affected? You're right. They're not good people. During this time, these forces in the depths of the sky are all overbearing and tyrannical and overbearing. They treat us like primitives. The problems of bullying our men and taking our women is common. If it wasn't because we aren't their match, we would have slaughtered them long ago. It is so pleasing that Yi Shiwen did it now. Suddenly, everyone discussed about it. It created a real buzz, and everyone started discussing it without restraints. Along with their discussion, the incident that Yi Shiwen slaughtered all the leaders of the Emergent School spread quickly across the starry sky and spread towards the true martial world. It was spreading out at an alarming rate. Yi Shiwen naturally didn't know what happened after he left, and he didn't mean to care about these things at all. Instead, he fell directly to the big Wind Dragon Star. Over the past many years, there are still many experts on the Wind Dragon Star. For people like Yi Shiwen who have only lived for decades, the past 20 years have indeed been regarded as a very long time. But for those who have lived hundreds of years, thousands of years of sanctuaries and great holy realms masters, what was this? It was as long as a snap of their fingers. Many of them would spend more time than this when they go into seclusion. Moreover, along with 20 years on the Wind Dragon Star, many treasures have been found constantly. More and more elite members of the Holy Realm joined in, and even great sages appear sometimes. This has led to more and more masters coming from this Wind Dragon Star. Half-step great sages have no position of foothold at all now. At the very least, they have to be elites of the Holy Realm to be eligible to come forth. Although there were no clear roles, it was basically an unspoken rule. Half-step great sages were too weak compared to these Holy Realm great sages. They have no qualification to intervene at all. However, the rules were like clouds in front of Yi Shiwen. He, who was an elite that slaughtered a great sage, was also one of the rulers on this big Wind Dragon Star. Only others follow his rules. What rules could restrain him? Compared to when Yi Shiwen first stepped into this place as a half-step great sage, he much more powerful. When he swept out his divine thoughts, he found that this star is full of holy places, elite-tier great sages, warriors from the outside, ferocious beasts, and star beasts. There were also local monsters like giant beasts lurking, but they couldn't hide from his scanning. After confirming that there are no masters of Holy Realm within 5,000 miles, Yi Shiwen immediately relieved his heart. If other great sages approach, it was also a huge trouble for him. Although it was impossible for elite great sages to exist, but he didn't. He wanted to deliberately create more problems. He was already very unhappy when the elite from Emergent School interfered. Yi Shiwen fell on that plane. There was a cave originally, but it was raised by that battle long ago. Yi Shiwen swept down on the ground, and sure enough, Underneath, there was a giant dragon-shaped spirit vein struggling, like a living creature, struggling and roaring. But its voice couldn't escape out. It was completely blocked by the barrier. Its body was also blocked by the barrier, unable to move. Yi Zaiwen's spell at the very beginning locked it up tightly. However, dragon veins are dragon veins after all. Although it was unconscious, if a great saint is not careful, they may be torn apart. Therefore, even if Yi Shiwen now has the strength to compete with the great saint, he would not dare to have the slightest carelessness. In addition, when Yi Shiwen deployed the dwarf dragons, he was still young. Moreover, his strength was still lacking too much. So the spell that he originally laid down struggled open quite a bit. Yi Shiwen didn't hesitate at all and stretched one spiritual hand downwards, grabbing straight for the dragon vein. Clang! A terrible howling was heard, and the pair of originally glassy dragon eyes opened up. It howled wildly and opened up its mouth, biting towards Yi Zaiwen's big hands. Boom! The terrible collision between the two sides started to shake the whole earth, and it seemed like the earth was about to collapse in a moment. Yi Shiwen let out a cold humph and blended into the ground. Chapter 655. Yi Shiwen had just integrated into the ground, and he felt a dragon claw falling from the sky. It grabbed towards him overwhelmingly, and a roar from the dragon vein met his ears. It sounded lifelike, and as if every single scale was shaking. It was angry to the extreme. Even though it didn't have its own consciousness, it only had a little instinct given by God. But even if it was just this instinct, but it was extremely terrible. Dragon veins are born endowed with the shape of a dragon, so they have the fighting instinct of the dragons. The dragons are a natural-born fighting race, and they can fight against God. This shows how terrifying it is. So for these dragon veins, even a great sage would feel tricky facing it. They could be torn in half if they were careless. Although this isn't a dragon, but to Yi Shiwen, there was no difference from a real dragon. Instead, because it doesn't have its own consciousness, the fighting instinct is even more terrifying. The dragon claws were extremely fast. It was its territory underground, and it was quite obvious that Yi Shiwen was slower underground. It was far less handy and smooth as it would have been when he was above the ground. Bang! Yi Shiwen was caught in the dragon claw, and far in the distance, there was a loud roar from the dragon veins. His whole body was locked within a huge barrier, so he couldn't go far. In the midst of it was also a part of a barrier that Yi Shiwen cast later on. But similarly, the barrier and seal was the best weapons to protect him. Even a great sage wouldn't be able to break this barrier. If they wanted to take away the dragon vein, they would have to personally enter the barrier and fight with this huge dragon vein. Huh! Yi Shiwen let out a low growl, his body suddenly bursting into a golden frenzy. At once, all of it turned into the sword's energy that stretched into the sky, shooting out in all directions. Boom! The dragon claw made up of spiritual energy exploded in midair, forming clumps of spiritual energy, which was absorbed by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen only felt that his whole body was comfortable. His cultivation, which was as firm as a dam, improved by another small step, and his eyes flashed suddenly. The effects of this dragon vein is really unordinary. I only devoured a clump of its claw's spiritual energy. Yes, UT pushed my cultivation a step forward. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but lament. That is natural. The dragon vein itself contains some dragon energy. It is a great opportunity for you. If you can devour this dragon vein, you can immediately cross over to be one of the great sages. Yimo said. Yi Shiwen was only a half-step great sage in the early stages now. He was an elite that could cooperate with the Tianyuan mirror to beat an early-stage great sage. If he managed to cross over to become a great sage, how strong would he be? One has to know that a dragon vein can succeed a big faction, and now all of it was consumed by Yi Shiwen. It is conceivable how much resources and temptations this is. However, Yi Shiwen pushed this tempting idea to the back of his mind quickly. Although consuming an entire dragon vein could allow his cultivation improve in leaps and bounds, but that was short-sighted. The biggest use of the dragon vein is to suppress one's destiny. He needed to nourish his mind and body at all times so that his ability could grow more and more. There might even be hope to surpass a great sage in the long run. Only the dumbest people would think to consume this dragon vein in a hurry. Yi Shiwen looked into the distance. He saw that the huge body of the dragon vein bound by the huge barrier. It was entangled together, and it could only move within the space of the barrier. But even so, it looked like a small mountain, and Yi Shiwen standing in front of this dragon vein seemed so small. Roar! The loud howl of a dragon caused a terrifying aura to sweep over, causing Yi Ziwen's clothes to rustle as it's blown. The huge face on the dragon vein was filled with a ferocious expression, apparently furious at Yi Ziwen's intrusion. Yi Shiwen had an abnormally serious expression. The Tianyuan mirror flashed a blood-colored light, and Yi Shiwen immediately changed into his star beast avatar. Although he was now strong enough to compete with a great sage, he could sense that the dragon vein in front of him was not easy to deal with. Even a normal great sage might fear the fate of being torn apart. He couldn't risk his deity. Whoosh! Without waiting for him to think, the dragon vein disappeared into thin air within the barrier and reappeared in front of Yi Shiwen waving its claws. No one knew when the claws that were blown up by Yi Shiwen earlier regrew. This was an authentic dragon claw. Many teachings have martial arts that imitate the shape of the dragon claw, but it wasn't authentic. No matter how a human used their two hands, it was impossible to look completely similar to a real dragon claw. Only those from the dragon clan has the greatest power when they use it fully. Although this dragon vein is not of the dragon clan, but compared with the dragon clan, it only lacked the self-consciousness, and it isn't in a flesh and blood body. When it used the dragon claw, it tore through the space. The dragon claw was like 5 sharp swords, killing fiercely. It was as if it wanted Yi Ziwen's existence to go extinct that very instant. Yi Shiwen was shocked. It was such a high speed. With this kind of speed, a normal great sage would have exploded. His speed has always been his pride. He had escaped from the great sage when he was still in the Holy Realm. It should be said that he has escaped from the hand of a great sage while he was still a half-sage. 1. It could be seen that his speed was incredible, and even a great sage couldn't catch up with him. Not to mention that right now, he was already a half-step great sage, and he was really only 1 step away from crossing over to become a great sage. But he was actually caught by the dragon claw while he was in the barrier at this speed. The speed of this dragon was really rare to see in his life. It was like a fish in water inside the barrier. Fortunately, this barrier is not in the soil itself, but separated by another void. Otherwise, Yi Shiwen would be in trouble. Although fleeing underground was a common magical martial art, but ever since the true way, human warriors started obtaining abilities that they weren't inherently born with, like flying, diving in water, and walking on fire. What was the true way? It is to return to the basics. Aside from the truth of the martial ways, there was also the truth of the human body. As the biology studies of the creatures on Earth says, mixed race tend to be different and better. Any species under the starry sky is better than a pure-blooded species. Those subspecies of dragon often needed to evolve again and again to purify the impurities in its blood to become a pure blood dragon race. It was so that they might have a chance to become a real dragon race. The human race is actually similar. In the legends, the ancient human beings have various special abilities. They were born powerful warriors. There was nothing they couldn't do, from opening rocks and splitting apart mountains. You could see it from the special constitution of human beings. Those are the people who have awakened their ancestry bloodlines. That's why they are particularly strong amongst the ordinary warriors. The true way stimulates the inherent potential in the body, starting from a certain extent. In the terms of previous lives, these special abilities are hidden genes that are in deep slumber. Only a minority of people are able to awaken it from birth. Most people have to go through cultivation to stimulate it step by step. The process of stimulating it bit by bit was by starting from the true way. However, although he has all kinds of special abilities that ordinary humans cannot have, after all, it wasn't a natural instinct. The underground still had too much restraints for him. It was far from the dragon vein that was a natural spirit like a fish in water. Yi Shiwen didn't hesitate and immediately blasted out a violent punch. Boom! The claw and fist colliding. Endless rays flew everywhere, illuminating the barrier, and the large space collapsed. Yi Zaiwen's fist actually started to hurt faintly. He was shocked. This is Star Beast Avatar. If it was replaced by the deity, his whole arm would have been broken by a punch. It has always been him relying on his domineering body to break others' arms in one punch. He's never met something that had a physical body that was so much stronger than him. Moreover, this is not physical. It is just a collection of spiritual energy. This dragon vein is simply outrageous. A normal great sage is really not its opponent at all. Yi Shiwen was also fortunate that he didn't come down hastily at first, otherwise he would have been looking for his own death. Countless elixirs started burning inside the Tian Yuan mirror that was in Yi Xiwen's body. The consumption of Star Beast Avatar was too large. At least 1 billion elixirs would be consumed in a full-out fight. Most of them were used in the last breakthrough, and there was only about 1,800,000,000 in total. There was only enough to fight once. But at this time he also had no choice. He absolutely had to obtain the dragon vein. Who knew if there would be any changes the next time? He didn't stop and accelerated the consumption of the elixirs instead, burning them wildly. Yi Shiwen rushed forward and fought with the dragon vein. Bang! 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 The terrible bombardment between a person and a dragon spread out. Roar! The dragon vein roared, opening its mouth wide. The endless spiritual energy around it was instantly absorbed, forming a huge spirit bomb. Boom! The spirit bomb was blasted out in an instant. Even if it were a great sage, would be broken into pieces if they were to be blasted by such a huge spirit bomb. But Thomas not allowed him to think more. Moreover, it was quite spacious in this barrier for his humanoid figure. However, he had limited space when it comes to facing the spirit bomb that was rolling over like a hill. He wasn't able to hide away from it. The reason why he chose to fight the dragon vein with all his might was because he considered this. The space was small, and no matter where you tried to move, there wasn't enough room. He could only give his all and fight to the death. Yi Shiwen spread his hands, and a bloody barrier appeared in front of him. Boom! That huge spirit bomb hit the barrier fiercely. A huge pothole blasted out on the barrier, and the cracks scattered in all directions. Yi Shiwen shouted. 10 million elixirs burned in his body as a terrifying power poured through his body. 1. There are a few different ranks where Great Sage is the highest, followed by half-step Great Sage, then half-sage. Chapter 656. Yi Shiwen only felt the power from his whole body was boiling, rushing out and pouring out through his hands. The blood-red barrier in front of him was repairing those cracks, little by little. Then again, little by little, it got damaged by the spirit bomb. This scene of the process of repairing and destroying looked abnormal and weird. It was a cycle, one after the other. Destruction and repairing. The forces of birth and death boiling in the process. Yi Zaiwen's aura was boiling and terrifying while his hair fluttered. Boom! At last, that terrible power had dissipated, and it turned into a sky full of spiritual energy. Yi Shiwen just breathed a sigh of relief, and in the distance came the constant raged roaring of the dragon vein. That dragon vein probably didn't think that Yi Shiwen would be so difficult to deal with. Its body was composed entirely of spiritual energy, and in this environment, it was basically a fish in water. Yet, it was unable to kill Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen moved faster than it, as a long sword appeared on his hand. It drew out a monstrous sword light and struck down like lightning. Bang! The sword slashed down smoothly from the middle, and the dragon vein was cut in half. But Yi Shiwen didn't relax, because he felt the dragon corpse that had been split in half was gluing back up little by little. Because it had no relation with a flesh and blood body. It had no spiritual knowledge, just instinct. So even if it was beheaded, it would be able to recover. Yimo, do it! Yi Shiwen yelled, protruding a monstrous hand from within his body, and grabbed at the slowly compounding dragon vein. Although the speed of the dragon vein's regeneration was fast, but to Yi Shiwen, it wasn't too fast at all. The dragon vein roared. But before it could react, it was grabbed tightly by Yi Mo into the Tianyuan mirror. The dragon vein fully recovered in the Tianyuan mirror. It roared continuously. Without the binding of the barrier, it unfolded itself completely. A roar shook the world within the Tianyuan mirror. Spirit bombs flew out and blasted the world until it was about to collapse. Boom! 4 huge chains fell from the sky, and the bloody chains instantly locked all the limbs, tail, and neck of the dragon vein to the ground. Roar! Dragon vein roared, furious. It wanted to break these shackles. It almost succeeded with its efforts, and the shackles were about to break. It was right at this moment Yimo materialized. He was a great demon. With a wave of his hand, many bloody chains of law descended from the sky and bound into the body of the dragon vein. It was firmly locked, just like the spirit of the star beast. The Tianyuan mirror was far different from what it was at the beginning. Back then, the Tianyuan mirror wasn't even a great sage tier weapon, and yet it managed to lock up the spirit of the star beast. Not to mention about now. The Tianyuan mirror has already become a great sage tier weapon. Its power is far greater than in the beginning. Back then, he had to use all his strength to suppress the spirit of the star beast. But for Yimo now, it doesn't require as much effort as it did before. Now he could completely suppress the dragon vein in a leisure and calm manner. Yimo shouted, and blood-stained runes began to dance in the sky, falling like raindrops onto the body of that dragon vein. Every rune that fell onto the dragon vein let out a burst of bloody light, followed by the tortured roar of the dragon vein. On the other side of the Tianyuan mirror, elixirs burned wildly in a pile like a small hill. It turned into spiritual energy that poured into Yi Mo's body like a river. It made Yi Mo grow larger and larger. It was faster and faster even in the hands, and slowly the runes completely suppressed the dragon vein. Yi Shiwen, it's okay here, leave it to me. Yi Mo yelled out. He wasn't able to split and come out now, even though he said that he has initial control of the dragon vein, but it was only the preliminary control. Generally speaking, the dragon veins that are captured are usually placed under the foundation of their martial school and suppressed underneath with a supreme technique. It would be the pride of that martial school. They wouldn't simply move, but only increase in formation, but Yi Shiwen couldn't do that. He had no intention to be independent or develop his own martial school. This dragon vein was only for his personal use, therefore it has to be kept in the Tianyuan mirror. But this was a big trouble and danger, as it could be exposed anytime. Once Yi Shiwen is in a heated fight with someone, and he allowed the dragon vein to have a turn, he will be dead for sure. This was not an ordinary thing. It's a dragon vein that could tear great saints apart. So Yi Mo was to go into hibernation just to suppress this dragon vein. Yi Shiwen has to wait until everything is well prepared before he could use the dragon vein's power for his own use. There are many ways to adjust the strength of the dragon veins for your own use. There is the method that is commonly used by folks to build a cemetery above the dragon vein in a specific way. This would definitely bring good fortune to their descendants. It was the same concept as building the foundation of a martial school on top of a dragon vein. The only difference is its efficiency and strategy. After completely suppressing this dragon vein, Yi Shiwen will be able to enjoy the benefits of this dragon vein exclusively. It is simply indescribable. To Yi Shiwen now, it was simply adding wings onto a ferocious tiger, allowing it to soar into the sky. Seeing that Yi Mo had the situation under control, Yi Shiwen felt relieved. He could finally use the dragon vein for his own use. Thank goodness for the barrier. If the aftermath of the battle was spread outside and discovered by someone, it would cause an uproar. A dragon vein could help a martial school thrive and hold the luck of that school. Once this kind of thing is born, all the great sages will rush to this place in a frenzy. Yi Shiwen was very clear of this. However, Yi Shiwen did not leave in a hurry. It was unknown how long this dragon vein has been pinned here, and how much spiritual energy it has emitted, this dragon vein itself doesn't know how to cultivate and only continuously emits spiritual energy. The spiritual energy here could almost be considered to be solidified. Moreover, it was emitted directly from a dragon vein and not some second-class spirit vein. Yishuan wouldn't give up naturally. He sat directly in the void and started operating the scripture of viewing people. Yishuan turned into a boundless starry sky. The countless stars in the sky started turning in a frenzied manner and absorbed all the spiritual energy, all of it flowing into his body. Slowly, the uncountable spiritual energy beside Yishuan swept into a hurricane around him. It formed into a cocoon of spiritual energy and wrapped him completely inside it. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Bang! The cocoon became very thin after 3 days and nights of frenzied absorption that the humanoid figure inside was almost visible. The cocoon completely shattered with a loud explosion, revealing Yishuan. Yishuan opened his eyes, and a strong aura poured out. These 3 days were like 3 years or 30 years to him. Countless spiritual energy gushed towards him. It was as if the sea capsized over you, and you have to absorb all the seawater in the shortest amount of time. It was much more urgent compared to when he cultivated on his own. It actually took him 3 days and 3 nights to absorb with his current capacity of absorption. The massive amount of spiritual energy was almost impossible to imagine. However, these 3 days and 3 nights of desperate absorption was not without any benefits. The crazy absorption of spiritual energy during these 3 days and 3 nights has completely consolidated his cultivation into the early stages of a half-step great sage, and even reached the peak of it. With a little more time, he would completely cross over to the middle stage of a half-step great sage. Even he didn't expect that he could reach the peak in such a short amount of time. Although the transformation of his soul has been completed, but compared with ordinary people, the speed of his progress was incomparable, nor can he be mandated by an ordinary person's standards. But he still felt that it would take several years to cross over the mid-stage of a half-step great sage. This was faster than an average person. It was only that he didn't expect it to be so soon that he was able to cross into the mid-stage of a half-step great sage already. However, Yishuan thought about it and still didn't decide to make a breakthrough here. It was too dangerous to make a breakthrough in this place where a great sage may appear at any time. Moreover, Yi Mo's main energy was focused on suppressing the dragon veins. It was better to retreat back to the true martial school. On the endless plains on the wind dragon star, a golden light flashed and a figure appeared on the plains. Yishuan was about to fly out of the wind dragon star to true martial school. Suddenly, the sky was torn apart and a figure walked out. It was a tall man with dark face and long beard, staring at Yishuan with a fierce look. A horrible atmosphere spread all over. It was not the aura of an ordinary great sage, but the magical energy that Yishuan was very familiar with. But there was only one type of people with this kind of impure demonic aura, which was the demon-worshipping religion. Yi Zaiwen's eyes flashed brilliantly. He didn't expect that he would meet an elite from the demon-worshipping religion here. In fact, because of the impact of demon realm has on this starry sky, the demon-worshipping religion can be said to have great influence on all worlds. They had many elites. The demon-worshipping religion in the true martial world were the strongest. Because there was no force that could control the world, there was no way to completely suppress the demon-worshipping religion. The power of the demon-worshipping religion was usually more rampant in these worlds that were more chaotic. If all the forces of the demon-worshipping religion is unified, it would be terrifying. It could cause huge magic disasters. The good thing was that the demon-worshipping religion has their own factions and can't be unified. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.